Good evening. This is Bob Jorgensen. I want to call the May 26, 2021 regular meeting of the Planning Commission to order. Deputy City Clerk Kevin Christian, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Dondekar?
Yes.
Commissioner Hopkins is absent. Commissioner Khan, absent. Commissioner Shoresman, absent. Commissioner Wolkin?
Here.
Vice Chair Quincy?
Here.
Chair Jorgensen?
Here.
We have a quorum.
We have a quorum of 4. So let's jump in then. The first thing we need to do is, and I need to say that the commissioners are all present through teleconferencing. And I want to remind my fellow commissioners and staff to help us reduce background noise by muting your phone or microphone unless you are speaking. So the first item is consideration of the minutes of April 28, 2021. Does anyone have comments on the minutes? Suggestions, changes?
They look fine to me, and if nobody has comments, I make a motion to approve.
I have a motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
There you are. Good. Commissioner Quincy seconds. And I think we're ready to go. Could we have the Deputy City Clerk call the roll on that motion?
Commissioner Dondekar?
Yes.
Vice Chair Quincy?
Yes.
Commissioner Wolkin?
Yes.
Chair Jorgensen?
Yes. So the motion passes and those minutes are approved. This is a chance now for public comment. And that's for items that are not on tonight's agenda. Items that are raised in this manner are generally referred to staff, and if action by the commission is necessary, it may be scheduled for a future meeting. You need to follow the instruction on the screen if you'd like to make a public comment. Once the public comment for the item is opened, your microphone will be unmuted and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Deputy City Clerk, do we have any public comments?
Not as of yet. I just am sharing my screen so that they can see the instructions. So let's give them a moment for that. All right, I do not see any comments for items not on the agenda at this time.
Okay.
Back to the chair.
Good. Well, then we'll move to public hearings. And as a general statement before we launch into the first public hearing, any court challenge of the action taken on a public hearing item on this agenda may be limited to considering only those issues raised at the public hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the City of San Luis Obispo at or prior to the public hearing. If you wish to speak, please give your name and address for the record. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. Consultant and project presentations are limited to 6 minutes. So the first public hearing tonight, item number 2 on our agenda, is review of a tentative tract map to create 23 residential lots on an existing 4.98 acre site at 500 Westmont Avenue. So as we start that public hearing item, I want to ask each planning commissioner for their ex parte disclosures of contact with anyone who has provided information to the planning commissioners not on the record, so that information may be used as part of their decision-making process.
Commissioner Jorgensen, I have a disclosure. I was at the site this afternoon, and happened to talk to a neighbor who has property adjacent to this, and just had a casual conversation. He wanted to talk when he saw me tromping around, and and wanted to tell me what his feelings. So I think it should be on the record.
Good. Thank you for that. Is there anyone else who has a disclosure?
Commissioner Jorgensen, I don't have a disclosure, but I just wanted to know if you intended to skip the pledge, or if that was.
It's not on the agenda. I'm assuming that maybe we don't have the flag, or we didn't do it at the last meeting either.
I forgot.
I would like to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, Deputy City Clerk, is there any reason we can't do the Pledge of Allegiance right now?
We can absolutely do that. Let me grab the screen again,
good.
and I'll bring the flag up. One moment.
And I do apologize for last time. In the fervor of elections and so on, I forgot that we needed to do the Pledge of Allegiance. So it was a bit late by the time I remembered.
Well, Kevin, no problem. While Kevin's looking, is there anyone who would like to lead when we are ready to start?
Sure, I'll do that.
I am kind of lost my meeting here. Sorry, I can't see anything right this moment.
Oh, Chair Jorgensen, it's probably because I went ahead and shared my screen. So I've got the flag and the Pledge of Allegiance up for public view.
I can see that. I can see that.
Okay. See if I see it there. There it is. Good. Back into Zoom. Okay. And who volunteered? I'm sorry.
I did.
Good. Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'm glad we did that. Thank you for bringing that up. So we have now I actually introduced the first item, and we'll go back to it. And so the first item is really to ask Assistant Planner Kyle Van Leeuwen to present the report.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, can this first slide be seen by everybody? Okay. So we are here to review the proposed tentative track map, track 5157, to create 23 residential lots on a 4.98 acre site within the low density residential zone. Project would include the extension of Stanford Drive, which will connect to an extension of Cuesta Drive. Initial study with mitigated negative declaration is proposed with this project. Staff's upfront recommendation is to have the Planning Commission adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve tentative track map number 3157 and recommend the adoption of the associated initial study mitigated negative declaration. Excuse me. The project site is marked with an X here. It is just west of Highway 1. There are 4 streets that terminate into the site: Westmont Avenue, the east portion, Westmont Avenue, the west portion, as well as Stanford Drive and Cuesta Drive. The property is along the north boundary of the city limits, and there's a CAL FIRE headquarters station just north of that property. And again, that is not within the city limits. Here's a picture of the current site. There is one, or I guess it's 2 residences there, accessed from Stanford, a long driveway with palm trees lining the driveway. The primary geological figure or figure on the property is the existence of what's labeled Twin Ridge Creek here on the west side. That is a perennial creek and wetland that does run through this portion of the site. In terms of the project description, it is a tentative track map, which means it does not include any development of structures on the property for 23 lots. Extension of Stanford Drive to connect to a connection of Cuesta Drive. Does include sidewalks and parkways, water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure, potential bike and ped connection to the west, to the east. The proposed removal of 86 trees, as well as notable retention of 91 trees on site, and no exceptions with this project were requested from subdivision standards. This is a photo of the project site overall with the proposed lots. 3 lots would take access from Westmont Drive to the west. 2 lots would take access from Westmont Drive to the east, with the remainder 18 lots taking access from the connected streets. A little bit closer up view of the west portion of the site. The circles are locations for water, stormwater retention and treatment. Also notable are the arrows are the streets that to the west terminate Westmont Drive and Stanford Drive down to the at the bottom of the page. And the dark area over next to lot 1, that is the mitigation area for the Cambria morning glory that would be disturbed. And that is a mitigation measure and requirement to replace that at a 2-to-1 ratio. So that is twice the size of this area disturbed that currently has Cambria morning glory. As for the east portion of the site, again, the circle at the bottom shows another stormwater retention area. There's also the circle in the middle does show another stormwater retention basin. That's also the location of a potential bike ped connection that would connect the corner here of Quest and Stanford to Westmont on the east. In terms of previous reviews of this project, the project was reviewed by the tree committee on the 17th of this month. The tree committee did recommend that Planning Commission find the project consistent with the city's tree regulations based on the inclusion of a condition of approval for compensatory planning. They were had some specifics about that compensatory planning. They wanted the plantings to be an even mix of 15-gallon and 24-inch tree box sizes, and included that 50% of the required compensatory plantings be of a native species, and that is included as a condition of approval with the resolution. The tree committee also did identify 4 trees on site that they felt had a specific value and recommended the Planning Commission consider protection of these trees. Staff does not recommend the retention of these trees. Tree number 114 is a non-native tree. I believe it's a eucalyptus within the creek corridor. That would be in conflict with a wildfire mitigation measure that requires the removal of non-native trees in the riparian area. Then trees 33, 34, and 91 are located on lot 23, and they are either on or directly adjacent to a stormwater treatment retention basin, kind of the large one for the site. Also did want to mention that on the tree committee staff report and supporting documents, tree number 145 was incorrectly identified as being removed. That is a California live oak that is will be retained. And just so you know, the circles here do show where those specific 4 trees are. The one to the left there is the eucalyptus that's in the creek area. Again, that's going to be removed in compliance with the wildfire mitigation measures. And then the 3 you can see are right along that dotted line, which is designates where the retention basin starts. And just wanted to say that we will recommend or include with the resolution that the resolution for condition number 5 add the sentence here at the bottom, which essentially ensures that tree 145 doesn't get missed or for some reason, and tree labeled 145 in the project plan shall be retained, essentially. In terms of general plan consistency, there are a number of general plan policies that are highlighted in the staff report. A couple of them I've picked out here. One is that to foster suitable traffic speed, street design should include measures such as narrow lanes, landscape parkways, and things like that. Stanford is actually a street that has a 10-foot drive lane instead of a 12-foot drive lane. It's considered, I guess, narrow, and that will be continued for Stanford Drive, and it does include landscape parkways proposed. In terms of land use element policy 2.24, neighborhood connections, to look at connectivity to nearby community facilities such as parks and supporting commercial areas. It's kind of far away from here, but there is a park somewhat nearby, and should be enhanced and should not be done in a method that would increase cut-through traffic. And the way that the street connections are proposed at the end of Sanford and Cuesta would not create a new cut-through connection, so that people wouldn't, only residents would really have a reason to drive on the street. And I did want to show, there was some comment that asked why Westmont wasn't used. And this kind of shows that there's the Throat Park to the south. From the edge of the site at Cuesta Drive, that's about a 6-minute walk, about a 7-minute walk from the edge of project site. And that would be an almost 10-minute walk from Westmont. So this really is the best way for these new residences to have a somewhat short walk to a park, as short as they would be an option for this site. Do want to mention that land use element policy, there's lots of policies about protecting creeks and wetlands and wildlife habitat. Do want to show this. There was some questions from commissioners about not being able to read the plans. Great, there's a lot of lines on a lot of the plan sheets. So I did create this graphic. The red lines show the edge of the riparian, or the edge of the creek bank. And the stars represent where the ground cover riparian habitat extends beyond the edge of the creek. And then the dotted line would be the creek setback. One things to notice about this are that the only improvements within the creek setback are for Cambria morning glory or some lot grading, as well as some retention, stormwater retention facilities. So no major improvements really, besides the retention facilities, I guess, within the creek setback. And these are actually allowed with creek setback standards. Let's see, next slide. The other thing I did want to mention is that the only location on the proposed map that shows any improvement within the actual top of bank or prime riparian ground coverage is a little bit of grading here at the circle at the top. It's a grading line that really mimics the edge of the creek. It's just from these plans, just a little bit over. And then I guess the riprap pad for the overflow or the exit of the stormwater control there. So that would be something I think kind of rationally needs to be at a low point next to the creek. In terms of consistency with subdivision regulations, I did want to mention that there is a requirement for corner lots specifically. There's one corner lot proposed, and that would be lot 19. The corner lot should have a minimum area 50% greater than otherwise required and should be 10 feet wider than otherwise required. As currently proposed, it is 10 feet wider, but is not 50% larger. So we have included a condition that requires the area of lot 19 to be increased to no less than 6,900 square feet, which is that 15% larger. This can be accomplished just by moving the lot line between 19 and 20, and it does not create a non-conforming lot for lot 20. I talked to the applicant, and they do say that this is achievable. Here is a breakdown of gross lot size and net lot size. Again, minimum net lot size, except for lot 19, is 6,000 square feet. What's important to note about this is lot 1 through 7 have a different gross than net lot size. That is because per subdivision standards, none of the area that's within the top of bank of the creek can be counted towards the net lot size to meet that minimum lot size requirement of 6,000 square feet. So naturally, those lots are larger to compensate for the lost square footage and still make the minimum required size. In terms of the environmental review that's associated with this, I think the areas of most attention are the biology and wildfire. The project would result in a removal or disturbance of the Cambria morning glory. There's an implementation measure to replant and monitor, I believe, for 5 years so that it does take hold, and that is at a 2-to-1 ratio. There is a fire protection plan that requires, as stated earlier, removal of non-native trees within the riparian habitat area. There is also a mitigation measure in the biology section that is no net loss of habitat or creek protection. No net loss of habitat and creek protection measures. And so anything disturbed or removed within there would be replanted. I should say replanted with native species. I do want to mention two edits to the draft initial study. First is in the project description. The project description, due to a project description provided to our consultant who produced it, had the language from the first submittal, and the first submittal had a smaller lot for lot 1. So I do want to be clear that this will be modified to reflect that the largest lot size is 24,451 square feet and not 22,783 square feet. That'll be an easy edit. I also wanted to mention one of the astute member of the public noticed that lot 3 was left out of the description for the phasing. And so phase 1 would include lot 1, lot 2, lot 3, lot 17, and lot 18. So that statement about lot 3 being part of phase 1 will be included as a slight edit to the draft resolution or the draft initial study. We did receive public comment about insufficient noticing. We do have standards for noticing, and they were carried out for this project. So the noticing shows that it does appear in the paper at least 10 days before Planning Commission. This appeared in New Times and on May 13th. We do have a postcard mailing procedure with all sorts of checks and balances where people sign off that certain steps were done, as well as me signing off on language before the postcards are made. And that was, from all records, accomplished on May 14th. Want to mention that posters were also placed at each one of the terminus of the streets that run into the site. There's also one specific correspondence we did want to talk about up front too, and that was a correspondence stating that there was another stream that eventually connects to the Twin Ridge Creek, and that it appeared suitable for California red-legged frog, and included photos of tree and bullfrogs at that location that's a little ways away upstream. Comment did say that the report fails to acknowledge that there's a nearby creek that converges on Twin Ridge Creek. It's not really an error, it's just that it's failed to notice that. And the request, and it goes on to request that a detailed amphibian study should be done for this creek and the nearby creek. We do just want to say that the bio report, the initial study, the site it clearly states that the site does not provide suitable aquatic breeding habitat for California red-legged frog. The on-site drainage is intermittent and does not contain water of sufficient depth long enough for California red-legged frog larvae to complete metamorphosis. The stream lacks pools and depths to support California red-legged frog, and the site does not provide connections to other suitable aquatic sites. There's also additional study I've been made aware of that bullfrogs actually usually eat red-legged frogs, so the appearance of a bullfrog in a nearby area actually reduces the likelihood of a red-legged frog being there. So just wanted to kind of cover that one. That was a specific note of the red-legged frog, so we did want to cover that. Oh, and we did want to add that in addition, mitigation measure, the mitigation measures require that a pre-construction survey for the special status wildlife and the installation of a creek protective measure to protect the creek corridor and exclude wildlife from the site during construction. So, and biological monitoring. So there are some measures. Not only was the survey done before the initial study, but there are follow-up studies to make sure none of these species of special status end up on site. And again, staff's upfront recommendation is to adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve the tentative track map and adopt the associated initial study mitigated negative declaration. And that'll conclude staff's presentation, but happy to answer questions.
Are there any questions of staff?
Chair Jorgensen, I had a question.
Please.
Kyle, there was a letter commenting on the fact that the CEQA comment period is not over. It'll be over May 31st. Does staff have any comments on that?
Sure. So the comment period does need to be concluded before the initial study mitigated negative declaration is adopted. And since Planning Commission is making a recommendation on that, there's no conflict there. I would say it's typical that we get the full review period in before we get to Planning Commission, but it's not a requirement, and it's I think 2 days short. So we did feel confident to go ahead and move forward with this project this time.
Thank you. The second thing was about notifications. You mentioned in your presentation that postcards were sent out. What range are the postcards sent out from the boundary of the proposed development?
The subdivision regulations and a resolution adopted by council requires 300 feet from the edge of property, and that was the radius used for this project.
So I think one of the letters stated that they were within the 300 feet but didn't receive any intimation. Was that just an oversight, or could there be some issues with because we had several letters saying, oh, we never heard of this.
Yeah, I can't say what happens to the mail, or, I mean, these are postcards that are 4 by 5, I guess, in inches or so. Sometimes people don't notice that they're a notice. I really can't say. I made sure that all the steps and normal procedure that we carry out happened, and nothing indicates that noticing didn't happen for postcards being sent out. Obviously, it's hard for us to, well, we sent them out, so we don't have it in our hands.
I just asked because there's more than one comment, more than one letter that states they didn't hear about this. So yeah, I just would like to note that.
Could I ask a follow-up question just on that topic real quickly before you ask other questions? Are you addressing occupants, residents, or owners when you're sending out postcards?
Sure. So we send out to the property owners. Those are the records we get from the county for the current property owner for all of those properties. We also send out a postcard that's just labeled with all the addresses, and it's labeled to occupant. So there's even scenarios where, if you live on your property, you'll get two, because there might be some overlap.
I see. Thank you. Appreciate that. Ima, did you have other questions?
Yeah, you answered my question about the frog. But yes, my last question was, Westmont comes in from the east and the west. I take it the history of that break is that this property was just not within city jurisdiction. Is that right? That's why the Westmont didn't continue through this property?
I did a little bit of research and I couldn't really find that much about it. I believe the property was within the city limits at the time, and this property just didn't go along with the subdivision. But I don't have an exact answer for that.
Because, when you look at it on map framework, it seems like the logical connection through this site. I mean, rather than this circuitous cul-de-sac kind of. Anyway, I'll have comments on this, but thank you. That's all.
Are there other questions?
I do have a
Mr. Chair,
question.
Please, Mike. Mhm.
Yes. There are a couple of underground retention areas that are shown within the creek corridor, and I was wondering about how much excavation is required for those retention areas.
So I was looking into that. I should send that question ahead of time. And, I'm not a civil engineer, and I'm sure the applicant would be able to answer better. It looks like they're 45 inches below ground. Again, I wouldn't be comfortable giving an exact answer of exactly how much excavation that requires.
And would those features be considered a natural drainage facility that would normally be allowed within the riparian setback?
Yeah, the language there, it says natural drainage facility or stormwater retention, and it would be under our interpretation of that and previous interpretations.
Okay, all right. And thank you for staff for touching on the issue of the notifications and the red-legged frog. There was still, I think, an issue that was raised in the letter about the red-legged frog concerning the perennial nature of the stream, which I think conflicts with what was in the initial study. So I was wondering if that if that's significant new information or not that needs to be addressed in the initial study.
I can't say that for sure. We'll take a look to see if there's some beefing up, but the applicant's biologist who I believe wrote that report would be available as well tonight, from my understanding.
Oh, okay, that's good. So at what point in the proceeding could we ask the applicant's biologist during the applicant's testimony?
That would probably be the best.
Okay. All right, fine. And just one final question, just to get this out of the way before we start deliberations. If the Planning Commission were to entertain a reduction in the number of lots, would we be running afoul of the any state housing laws, even though this is not an affordable housing project?
I don't know that I have an answer prepared for that. I'm not sure if city attorney or anybody else wants to chime in.
Yeah, I'm happy to jump in. This is Marky Jorgensen. I think at this time, what's being proposed is not considered a housing development project under the Housing Accountability Act, but later on in the process, it seems like it would be considered a housing development project under state housing law, and application of those rules would be applied later on, and potentially any requests for incentives, concessions, or waivers under density bonus law could be pursued if there's an affordable component to the project.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure I got the answer I was looking for there.
I can clarify that at this moment in time, what is in front of the Planning Commission does not meet the definition of a housing development project under the applicable state housing laws that you're referring to. But later on down the line, as development begins, there could be applications that meet the definition and of housing development project, and application of those laws would be analyzed then.
Okay, so what I understand then is that the Planning Commission would not be constrained by state housing laws in connection with this tentative tract map. Is that correct?
Based on the information available to me at this time, yes. If anyone else from planning wants to jump in and clarify, or we could go offline and discuss, but based on my knowledge at this time, that's correct.
Yeah, I would chime in and just agree with what we just heard from our assistant city attorney. At this time, the planning commission could make a recommendation that could, as you suggest, Commissioner Wilkin, reduce the total number of lots in some way. Obviously, that is going to be required to a further hearing before the city council for their consideration of that recommendation, along with staff's recommendation in that regard. And if that is such the case, we will definitely look into that issue in more detail. But I think at this time, based on what we know, that is available to the planning commission should they choose to make that recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are all my questions for now.
Are there other questions from commissioners?
Mr. Chair, I have a couple questions.
Sure, go ahead, Nick.
Kyle, I noticed in the staff report, it says when the map's recorded, it triggers the installation of public improvements. Can you shed a little light on that, how that works, and if we should be making some type of condition about how that's implemented? And I was just hoping you could explain that a little bit.
Sure, and Hal Haniel, city engineer, is also on the phone, or on the call. You might be able to highlight more, but my understanding is that we would receive public improvement plans in connection to the recording of the final map, or at least the phasing of those phases if they go that route. And so those are required to be installed prior to the recording of the final map, I believe, if Hal has any additional information on that.
Hi, commissioners. Yeah, that would be correct. If the map is recorded prior to the installation of the improvements, then they would bond for those. We'd have to have public improvement plans, subdivision improvement plans approved, both public and private improvements. And then the developer, if he wanted to record a map, would post a bond, would have a subdivision agreement that would specify the timing to build those improvements. So that's the most typical route that we see. A subdivider could build out the improvements and then reduce their bonding costs, so they could build them out completely and have a raw land subdivision and sell individual lots to individual custom home builders. So typically we're seeing a home builder come in and buy up an entire subdivision, but this could be a mix and match of any of those scenarios.
Gotcha. Thank you for that explanation.
Sure, you're welcome.
And then my second question, Kyle, had to do with the transportation impact study here. I'm pulling up a quote here on the initial study. So it looks like you cited that 110 trips per day. If it's under 110 trips per day, that is deemed to be less than significant. But as you also noted, that with the number of proposed residences, it would be over 110 trips per day. And then you cited an 85% of regional average number, and I just really didn't understand that. So I was hoping that you could explain that and why this would be deemed less than significant.
We also have, I believe, Luke Schwartz available, if he is available to chime in on that.
I've just promoted him. He'll be available in a moment.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, so the section you cited in the initial studies regarding vehicles miles traveled, the city's adopted thresholds basically allow projects that generate less than 110 vehicle trips per day are essentially considered exempt. So in this case, that would fall under that criteria. The next phase, so if a project generated, above 100 trips per day, it would fall under a map-based screening threshold, where we have generated average VMT maps for different areas of the city for residential and non-residential. And this use would fall within an area of the city that is shown to have a less than significant VMT impact based on the city's adopted thresholds. Essentially, based on our kind of housing jobs imbalance, almost any kind of new residential within the city, regardless of, or it depends on the location, but in general, has a positive impact on regional VMT by adding housing in places where people are more likely to have access to more jobs, access to other transportation alternatives and driving compared to other places in the county.
Got you. Got you. Thank you. And thanks for explaining that. I think I did have vehicle miles traveled and trips per day, a little confused there. So thanks, Luke.
Are you good, Nick?
I am. Thank you, Chair.
Let me just quickly ask one or two questions. There was a question about whether there had been an analysis of a pre and post project hydrologic flow conditions. And I was curious what response you have to that.
I think I'll go to Hal again if he's available.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right, I'm back. Yeah, there was a hydrologic study both for the existing Twin Creeks Creek, because it's not a map flood zone, but our regulations would say if there's areas of known flooding, and we know that any channel might experience some flooding in a rain event. So they did analysis of that. You'll see on the tentative map, they've defined where the 100-year limits are and basically showed that the 100-year flood stays within the tops of the banks. So we didn't have any concern about the building pads or houses being flooded. And then they also analyzed their pre versus post runoff from the site. They take credit, obviously, for the existing private roadway in the house and those impervious surfaces, analyze the post-development situation in several different watersheds, and showed that the runoff to the adjoining streets or channel were the same or less than pre-development rates. And so they analyzed that through the 2 through 100-year storm event, and those reports are part of their submittal package with the tentative map.
I see. We just didn't see it, but I get the idea. So the last question I had was that the fire protection plan that requires non-native trees to be removed from the creek bed, the riparian corridor. I guess I'm figuring out now that's actually a requirement of the biology report, another report we didn't actually see. In other words, that's not a citywide requirement at this point.
No, that wouldn't have been a citywide requirement. It does correlate with the biology report as well. Let's see, actually. Oh, I thought maybe I had another extra slide there. Correct. Essentially, the biology report also stated that the here it is. The creek setback area will be enhanced through removal of non-native vegetation and planting of native grass, tree and grass species.
Where's the fire protection plan that requires it?
That was another study that was submitted on the initial submittal, and it was cited within the initial study, but was not provided as an attachment.
I see. On the packet, page 9, that's a quote from it that it's required. See, I need to go smaller. Sorry, I need to go back to this.
So essentially, the fire report was what the applicant looked into and provided at the time of submittal, and the mitigation measure was based off that report.
That confuses me. I'm trying to figure out sort of what standing the word requirement is as part of this.
As a mitigation measure for wildfire impact?
Right, that it would require non-native trees to be removed.
You're right to reduce fuel loads, I believe. Is there still confusion there?
Sorry, I had to get out of full screen and back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's in the, sorry. It's just in the biology. Sorry. It's another thing you can't do when you don't print this out, is you can't go highlight something easily, at least in my version of Adobe Acrobat Reader.
It's on at the bottom of page 9 under wildfire.
Yeah. Part of this mitigation measure calls for the removal of non-managed plant species. So that is a wildfire protection report. We didn't see such a report. Is that right?
Correct. That was provided as reference information to create the initial study in connection to the initial study.
By the applicant.
By the applicant, correct.
Mm-hmm. So what standing does that recommendation have? Is it now embedded in the initial study such that it's now a required mitigation? Are we signing off on that?
Correct. For wildfire checklist item B, it's less than significant with the proposed fuel management plan, which was part of the submittal, the initial submittal.
So by approving the initial study and negative deck, we would be endorsing this then?
That would be a part of the, right.
Mm-hmm.
We would say that those mitigations are appropriate for the identified impact.
Yeah, it's, I guess I'd like to see the report and understand what it's based on. Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of staff from?
I just had one last question about trees, Kyle. Where exactly is tree 145, and is that the California live oak that's to the south of the property, the large California live oak? Could you just point out on the site plan where it is?
So 145, I think you can see my cursor here. You're right there. Does my
I
cursor?
see it.
Okay.
And what about?
Could you do that again? Sorry, when I lost my screen for a minute there.
So just north of the letter K here is tree 145.
In the creek?
Mm-hmm.
Geez. Give me just a second here. Let's go back to full screen.
So right here where the hand is.
Right, I see where you are. I see. It doesn't show it as being eliminated there. It has no X by it, but
Correct. This is an updated.
Oh, okay.
Commissioners had requested that we get a tree map with the lots overlaid on it, so the applicant was able to provide this. This was also the map.
Appreciate it.
Minus the circles that was provided for by staff correspondence.
Got it.
So Kyle, I had a question about the south side of the trees that are being eliminated. There is a large California live oak there too. Is that correct?
I'm not sure about live, but in one of the three in this circle is a California live oak.
And the reason for its elimination is because of a retention basin. Which one is that?
Right.
It's a large one.
Let me see.
91 is the live oak.
91 is live oak, so that is the one that's directly on top of the proposed retention basin.
And can you tell me, I don't really understand. So the retention basin, you can't have a tree there. Why? That's just a water pooling place, isn't that right? What is a retention basin? It's where water can just pool.
No, this would be an underground retention basin.
So
So you-
concrete storage?
I'm not sure if the applicant may be able to highlight a little more what goes into installing that or what they're made out of, but my understanding it's an underground retention basin.
Thank you.
Covered with something. Are there any further questions?
Yes, if I may, I just wanted to follow up on Chair Jorgensen's question about the fire mitigation plan. Is it a typical requirement to remove all non-natives within a riparian corridor? And I just wanted to make clear that if this is the report's recommendation, but it's not necessarily a city recommendation. Is the fire department recommending this measure, or another city department, or do they agree with it? Where's it coming from?
Sure. The city fire marshal does agree with. He did review the initial study and agreed with the report and mitigation identified in that report. I think additionally, important to remember is that these are identified as invasive species. They can deplete the health of the native species in the area. So their removal not only can reduce the fuel load by themselves, but make sure that a native mixture of trees is there instead, and not being deprived of nutrients and water in the soil, so keep them from becoming fire hazard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready finally for the applicant presentation. Applicant, or maybe it's a team. How can you, I guess you can't introduce them until the city clerk promotes them, so to speak. Huh?
I will say that they don't have their own presentation, so if there are certain questions, I will flip through my slides to help that discussion, but I do believe they have a statement to make.
So we're set to, well, let's at least have the presenter for the project introduced.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'm Katie Rollins. I'm the applicant's representative. I'm a civil engineer at Canon. And Kyle, thank you for putting together your presentation and answering so many questions. We're available to answer any additional ones you guys may have. We've appreciated all the input that staff has given us in the last 2 years getting this project prepared for today. As Kyle showed you in the maps, this project is a completion of a much larger College Highlands subdivision that happened in the 1950s. And the original developer actually kept this lot as their personal residence in 1958. And now the mine holds have grown up there, and this was their property where they grew up. And now that they're older, it's finally time for them to see this property develop to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood as smaller lots. So yeah, it's been 2 years we've been working on this project, and it's consistent with all of the thoughtful city regulations and the creek setbacks, circulation requirements, stormwater measures, which I know there's been a lot of questions on today regarding why there's underground detention systems and such. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that. And just to summarize, this is an infill housing project. We're not seeing an annexation with it. It's just an addition to an existing neighborhood, and it'll provide good housing without urban sprawl. So we do have additional consultants, and the applicant is here with us. We have Kevin Merck, our biologist, Tim and Andy Meinhold are the applicants, and Jim Flagg, who is a consultant to the owner. So please ask us any questions. We're happy to answer them.
Who'd like to jump in?
Great.
Sure, I'll go ahead and start with a question I asked previously about how much excavation is required for the 2 underground retention areas that are shown. I think they're on lots 1 and 3. that seem to be within or right adjacent to the riparian area?
Yeah, so that retention area is designed to hold the 95th percentile storm for stormwater control and treatment measures. And that area is in fill. So it'll be maybe 3 feet. I didn't do the exact math. It'll be a foot on top and then another 2 feet underneath to hold the water. And then it will soak into the ground.
So those areas are designed to handle the drainage from those lots on the west side of the creek, right?
Exactly. They'll catch the smaller storm events for the post-construction stormwater requirements.
Okay. All right. And I was wondering if the applicant, when they were designing the project and looked at the possibility of doing a more flexible subdivision with a transfer of density from the western creek portion of the property to the eastern portion of the property, using smaller lots to keep the same overall density in the western, in the eastern portion of the site.
I'm not sure I understood your question, but the subdivision was designed in order to be consistent with the subdivision regulations and to meet all those requirements.
I understand that. I was just wondering if an alternative, a more flexible design was considered. In other words, a clustered subdivision with the western portion of the site being an open space and the eastern portion of the site having smaller lots to retain the same overall density.
Yeah, and I think if the lots were smaller, we wouldn't meet the subdivision requirements, so we couldn't do that.
Right, except through what's called a planned development.
Yes.
I understand is an option. I just wanted to know if the applicant and the design team considered that, but sounds like not.
No.
Okay, those are the only questions I had. Thank you.
Yep.
Are there other questions?
I would like to understand the retention approach for especially to the south side where several trees are being eliminated because of the retention.
Yeah, so there's the post-construction stormwater requirements, which are the retention requirements for the smaller storms. And actually the facility on lot 23 is a stormwater treatment facility, so a retention facility, but it's also a flood control facility where it helps, it mitigates the flow from the post-construction 100-year storm. So we don't get higher flows going into the creek because of the new impervious area. It's related to the hydrology study Hal discussed earlier.
And so it's a structure, an actual retention basin with concrete, or how exactly does that work?
Yeah, so there's a few options for underground detention facilities. It could be concrete, so there would be concrete basins underground, and then of course they wouldn't have a bottom, so you would have retention, infiltration, and then there's also other products which we see used a lot more in San Luis Obispo, like plastic arch chambers surrounded with gravel, and there's a few different options for how we can design that.
And those preclude having trees there.
Yeah, you have to do excavation in the whole area and then put your structure in. So you would lose the tree in the meantime.
I had a second question, which is the kind of circulation that was introduced. Was there any consideration given to connecting Westmore?
I think it was taken off the table early because it would have increased the impacts to the creek.
Mm-hmm. You have to cross the creek.
Exactly. So by looping Stanford and Cuesta, we're increasing the circulation without.
And what about exit just on the west side to Westmore?
I'm sorry.
What about connecting to the western section of, the eastern section of Westmore, not going across the creek?
Yeah, the grades worked out better to do Cuesta to Stanford connection. Also, if we were to connect Westmont from the east into Cuesta and Stanford, it would increase the potential for cut-through traffic because people could turn right off of Highway 1 down into the neighborhood and around.
Thank you.
Other questions? Well, I'm seeing none, so thank you very much. That was helpful.
Of course.
Deputy City Clerk, I think we're ready to hear from the public as part of this public hearing.
Absolutely, Chair. Let's just remind the public that if you'd like to speak, you need to raise your virtual hand, and then I'll call your name and promote you to a panelist so that you can turn your video on if you have it, and of course your microphone to speak to the commissioners. At this time, well, actually, over the course of the presentation so far, there's been a couple people who have raised their hands and then lowered them. So I encourage them, if they wanted to raise their hands again, to do so. The first one that we have on our list is Marianne Stansfield. Marianne, I'm going to promote you now. So she's being promoted now, and once she's able to start speaking, I will go ahead and start the timer. We have a 3-minute timing. And Chair, I just wanted to ask before she starts, in our last meeting, you had expressed that you preferred just seeing the presentation up and not kind of the agenda and stuff up. I do have a slide that would show the timer. If you'd like, I can present that if that would be helpful for you.
Sure. Let's try it out.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, Marianne, you should be able to speak now.
Yes. Hi,
Perfect.
can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all so much. I appreciate this this moment. We're actually leaving for 2 weeks on vacation, so we just got under the wire to get in on this this planning commission meeting. So thank you. My name is Marianne Stansfield, and I live at 653 Stanford Drive. Our property backs up to lot 23, 22, and 21 of the Westmont development. And so I have several questions, and I mean, do I just give my questions all during my 3 minutes and then people can respond, or I'm not sure.
I can't guarantee that people will respond, but
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I would like, I'll go ahead and just make my statements and a couple of questions. Thank you so much. So I am in agreement with the tree commission about trees 91, 34, and 33. Trees 34 and 33, I believe, are the eucalyptus up there on the hillside, and they are absolutely heritage trees in our neighborhood. The base of these trees is I don't know the exact width, but these are old trees that have been here, and they're part of the habitat, part of the ecosystem. Birds, and I mean the birds that live in these trees are abundant, and I really would like the Planning Commission to consider not removing 91, 94, and 93 in agreement with the Tree Commission. On top of that, I'm curious as to, since our property backs up to such a wide swath of the drainage easement, just curious how that actually will kind of, evolve, as several of the commissioners have tonight have asked questions about, what is that? What is it a structure? I mean, that's right on the opposite side of our fence. And so, and on our side of that fence, there is a slope, it slopes down into our yard. And so we do have concerns about, what kind of construction is going to happen on the other side of our fence. And if there's going to be buildings that are, facility-like versus we lived in another area that was a master plan community, and it was all grass. And so is it going to be a park? I mean, we just have these kinds of questions. I know I'm running out of time. And if it's not one developer, who would manage that, the development of the drainage easement? And let's see what else. I've got 15 seconds here. One final comment. I would prefer not to have cut through traffic from Highway 1 on Westmont. So anyway, thank you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. That was, you covered a lot of ground. Kyle, can you respond to a couple of those questions? I'm thinking specifically of the, isn't there like a 3-foot high retaining wall that's kind of set back from the properties to the south that in a sense guards and contains the retention basins?
Right, so along the property line, there is a 3-foot max retaining wall. And again, these areas shown along the properties behind 19, lot 19, 20, 21, and some of 22 is, that's a stormwater treatment retention area. So like, I believe those are mainly surface improvements. I would have Hal or somebody else verify that, but I do see that there would be a 3-foot max retaining wall along the property line.
Maybe if Hal's available, I wouldn't mind. I'd like to know myself if he could respond to that. Is there a retaining wall, and what happens in between the retaining wall and the property lines to the south?
Yeah, the applicant probably could weigh in to see if they have more detail, but there's a 3-foot retaining wall, and then there's another tiered either 4 or 5-foot retaining wall at the building pad for a couple of those lots. So you have a little bit of a tiered effect on these retaining walls. And what I'm seeing is a subsurface detention system. So maybe they have some water quality surface on provision on the surface, but these are a bigger detention facility to deal with the peak storm management. What we're seeing on these smaller subdivisions and smaller development projects are combined systems where they're doing some retention. The retention provision and retention detention are definitely different things, but sometimes they'll use a combined system to cover both those. The retention is to replicate the sort of the natural watershed processes, get the water back in the ground. And obviously they can't do that under the houses or under the road. And it's supposed to be decentralized. And because this subdivision is so small, you'll see a couple of facilities and that's decentralized enough. And then the peak management is some kind of a storage chamber with a metered outlet. So the water flows in, the water flows out. Their analysis shows how high the water will get based on the flow coming in, and it'll get metered out so that in that 2 through 100 year event, the water exiting doesn't exceed the pre-development flow rates. So how it's going to be managed, you'll see a condition, proposed condition of approval that gives them options. It has to be managed by somebody. They could try to saddle individual property owners with it. I'm not sure in this case if they're going to have an HOA and CCNRs. I'm expecting they will. And most likely that will be what we'd see in this case. But in other smaller subdivisions, the developer has chose, or the home builder has chose to have those property owners that sit over the top of those structures responsible for maintenance. It's not completely fair, but the developer would have that option. They just have to tag someone with the maintenance, and we'll review those documents and easement agreements, expecting CCNRs and a HOA, a common group, to maintain it in this case. But like I say, until they come farther along the process, they would have options.
And Hal, if I could just follow up on that with one question as well. So between the retaining wall, the 3-foot retaining wall, and the property lines to the south, there's some distance. I don't have a scale with me to try to measure it right this minute, but who's responsible for that? And does that mean it, and is it likely to be planted and maintained in any way, or just bare ground?
It really depends on their final agreements. You know, they might just make it yard area for that adjoining property owner. You'll see the property lines cross over that area. It's not a separate defined lot. The lots cross over it, and then it's an easement in favor of their neighbors. So I expect it could be used for yard purposes, and they'll have some easement agreements to say what can get built there, what can't get built there. You know, they want to, you know, probably limit planting large trees, because that root system will get into this subsurface structure and would cause maintenance problems. So uh, those typical easement agreements, CCNRs will usually vet out those sort of concerns and uses of those spaces. So you don't just have a weed abatement, sort of a dog run back there. I think the owners are going to want to use that space for yard area, and that would be recognized typically.
Got it. That's actually very helpful. Let's see. Were there other questions we need to try to answer now? Maybe that's about this we can do. Who else would like to speak now? Can you tell us?
The next speaker that I have is Becky Keene. I'm going to promote you now. And once you come in, you should be able to turn on your video if you'd like, and monitor your own microphone, and then let me know and I will start your timer.
Hi, sorry about that. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sorry, the old mute button caught up with me. Hi, my name's Becky Keene. I live at 628 Stanford Drive. I just want to preface this with two of my neighbors came running over just now. Their computer is down, and so they won't show the raise the hand. So can you give them a allotted time as well after my time? Their names are Ginger and Adolf Check. So I just wanted to put that out there. They're sitting right next to me in my office. So, but think about that. They're here. But basically what I wanted to say was, Kyle, nice presentation. But with all due respect, I feel like you all are talking about this project as if it was on an island. There's been no talk about the impact of the surrounding neighborhood. I've lived on Stanford Drive. I'm a property owner for 30 plus years. This Stanford Drive has been a cul-de-sac street for 50 years since the original development. Now we find out from Katie, I was curious about how long this project had been in the works, and she says 2 years. So they've been working on it for 2 years. We were sent postcards, according to Kyle, and I'm sure he did what he said, on the 14th, but to date, I've talked to all of my neighbors. No one has received the postcard. So basically you have a project 2 years in the works for people who are going to be the most impacted by now all of a sudden being a thoroughfare on, if I implore you to come and visit Stanford Drive, it is a curvy, narrower than most road. We have more student rental properties on the street now than homeowner or single family homes. So both sides, when students are back for school, are fully parked on both sides. And it's very hard, even with just the cul-de-sac street, to bypass each other on the street. It's unsafe. It's not just a question of we don't want our little burg muddled. We realize the mine holes, they've been our neighbors for this many years. They have a right to do what they want, but we feel like that folks are not looking at the impact on the neighborhood that they should be. And this is a huge subject, and we have not had the chance, as said, we have not received formal notification and to really state our case. So I would just implore you to not sign off in anything today. Give us our chance and we can discuss next steps. But I would just ask you to think about if you lived on the street yourselves and how you would feel if all of a sudden this was being pushed down your throat, just finding out 2 weeks prior to this meeting that's saying that you're going to propose it to the city council, that how you would feel about that changing your life basically in your neighborhood. So I'm done now with my 3 minutes. May I turn it over to one of my neighbors? And I assure you I'm not a ventriloquist.
Sure. This is Deputy Clerk Christian. I'd like to give some instruction on that. We did have another speaker who had asked to speak in advance, and I want to honor that. So what I would ask you to do is to go ahead and mute your your mic, and then raise your hand again, and I will then call on your name again because that's the name that's in front of me, and then you can turn it over to your neighbor and they can introduce themselves to the panelists. And if at all possible, if you're able to use your video, that would be super helpful. And so that's my instruction on that. So the next speaker is going to be Robert Schroeder. And I'm going to promote you now, Robert, so that you're able to turn on your video if you're able to, and monitor your mic. Okay, Robert.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, hi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
A quick question. Would it be possible to share a screen with you? If not, no worries. I can just speak.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just for everybody's information in the future, the best, if you do want to share images with the commission, it needs to be sent to the city clerk in advance so that we can prepare that. Thank you.
Wasn't specified. Plus I had less than 7 days to respond. I'm one of those that did not receive a postcard. And it's really unfortunate to try to, in an instant, try to come up with a response and you know, a thoughtful presentation to you that can be evaluated when you guys make your decision. So I'm not sure who dropped the ball, but I know everybody on my street. I live on Jeffrey, 617 Jeffrey. Everyone on our street, which abuts to lots 1 through 3, did not receive a postcard. We are all within 300 yards or whatever you guys use as your benchmark of this property. So if you guys really want to have public comment, please include the public. The sign that went up at the entrance on Westmont was not put there until just a few days ago. So that was an addition probably since so many of us were complaining about not receiving notice. So I just want to make that clear that we really haven't had time to respond properly, and you guys are about to make a decision on a pretty important project. So now I'm the one that did present some information on the creek. It was pretty clearly omitted from your biological report that you have that there were no ponds in the area. That is not true. That is, in fact, the pond actually is on the property. The property line goes through, which actually is Twin Ridges Creek. There's, I guess you could call your branch of it on your property that you're proposing to develop, the East Fork. The main fork or the West Fork goes all the way up to the pond up on Bishop's Peak. Along that length, I have video, I have pictures of all the amphibians that reside within that creek, including below the, there's a culvert where the stream goes underground for a short stretch when it goes across Westmont and to Jeffrey. And it pops out and it does have wildlife in it. There's amphibians. If I could share it with you, I could show you that it's a very important watering hole for the wildlife that occurs on this open space at present. So my main concern here is the high density of development. I've got other concerns about flooding that hopefully can be addressed down the road. But my main concern is the open space. You guys claim in the city of San Luis Obispo to be strong proponents of open space. We have a lot of open space here, yet we have 23 properties that are being jammed into a very small space, some barely at the minimum lot size. In addition to that, you're proposing ADUs and JADUs for each of those properties. I'm not sure how the flooding calculation was done, but that's a lot of building. That's a lot of infiltration that's not going to occur. And it's a significant concern. I have not seen a single flooding report, even though I did extensive review online. In addition, the unit arrangement that you guys have calculated for all of those dwellings hasn't been presented. And based on the creek subtraction and the street subtraction, I'm not sure you're even able to build as many units as you say. I know my time is running out. I'm trying to go quickly here, but the last point I would like to make, I have a PhD in conservation ecology. I recognize the importance of open space. This project, unfortunately and fortunately, has a lot of open space on it. and you're proposing to put a lot of units, 23 houses and ADUs and JADUs, which no one has brought up, which is going to bring a significant amount of people and coverage over this open space. The permanent wetted water within that creek that I'm referring to is heavily used by wildlife. And with these homes being placed where they are, you're going to significantly cut off passage by wildlife to that permanent waterway. So all things that I hope you consider. I would really like to talk to somebody about flooding issues when available, and because it is a significant concern of ours. We have a neighbor down the road at 598 Princeton. His backyard regularly floods at current conditions. I'm not sure if he received a postcard to be part of this meeting. So that's all I'll share today. And I do want to point out, Kyle, this property with the wetted channel is downstream, not upstream. And it is just upstream of the confluence with the stream that you're talking about on the project. And so it's a perennial stream that has amphibians in it and all sorts of aquatic invertebrates. And that was not addressed in your biological report. So maybe it's time to take a closer look at what's going on biologically and maybe think this through a little bit more rather than very quickly pushing it through on the public. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Who's next now?
The next person that was in line is just identified as ebook. And just to give a heads up to the neighbors of Becky Keene, they would be the ones that would come up after ebook. So I'm going to promote ebook. And once you're promoted, if you could go ahead and identify yourself for the record, please.
Thank you. Found you. My name is actually Raylene White, and ebook is with me here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I have been listening to all this information that I have read, and I am not an expert on this, but I find this report lacking in many, many ways. And I think it should go back and be revisited, certainly. I will give you a little history since I have been on that street since 1964. My folks bought a house, my grandma bought a house. I moved away for a while, came back and bought a house on the Stanford Drive in 78. So I have been there and I have seen many changes. Beginning with the Minehold property, that you have to visualize that whole, when Stanford and Cuesta and those were built, that whole place was nothing but land. And Mr. Farini, I believe, was in charge of the building, and he did not want Westmont to go in front of his house, since he built his house as far back of city property without going into county. So that's why Westmont has never, ever been connected. One of the reasons way back when. And as far as the creek's concerned, that creek is a very, very important water source to many things, as Dr. Schwarter has said. In the days when it does rain a lot, it comes all the way down to Highland Drive and has jumped that Highland Drive area because of flooding. But what you have to recognize too is that down lower, down on 510 Stanford, 560 Stanford, you have underground water that comes up in the wintertime when we have enough rain. And that water gets underneath the houses. Now, my neighbor, whose name was Mrs. Spring, had a spring under her house. And she would have to take a hose every winter, put it under the house, and let it go out to the sidewalk. On the corner there, people have put some pumps under their house because of the water. And so I don't believe that the environmental impact study has been done correctly, especially if the applicant hired the biologist. I find that rather strange that the applicant would hire a biologist and the city would take completely their words for it. As far as traffic's concerned, if both sides of the cars are parked on both sides of the street, you can barely get one car through, and I don't see how the responders are going to be getting through there if somebody was coming the other way. It's very, very tight. So the only other option would be Westmont, to connect the Westmonts, build a bridge over that creek, and then make that area San Luis Obispo's pristine area. I just don't feel that should be just plowed under, paved over, drained over. So I thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much.
All right, our next speaker would again be back to the neighbor of Becky Keene. If you can, Becky, if you can go ahead and allow your neighbor to use your machine now.
Thank you. I'd like to introduce Ginger Check. Here she is.
Yes, good evening. We had to run over because the virtual hand signal would not come up on my primitive Chromebook. I did speak to the tree committee, and I'm happy to address the planning commission.
Do you mind introducing yourself again? I just couldn't quite hear Becky's
yes.
introduction.
Genevieve Check.
Got it. And you've written a letter as well.
Yes, I have, Mr. Jurgensen. It was long, a little bit long. Thank you for reading.
I read it all.
Thank you for reading.
We all read it, I'm sure.
Thank you. And I wonder, I hope you all have visited this pristine site and everything the last two speakers have been saying about what a very special place it is. And not only that, but over 40, 50 years, an ecosystem grows in a place when it hasn't had a lot of disturbance. So the tree life, the riparian, the creek life, it's all become established. And it's alarming that a plan is ready to disrupt it all with mitigating measures in given places. And I say thank you, Kyle, for your concern about the Cambrian flowers and about other issues. But I think the ignoring of the redwood trees, the other trees, their age, their majesty, their fire resistance, they have a right not to be just struck down. I'm frightened if I hear the axes and the saws and know what's coming down. They also have their own purpose. They are fire resistant. They are homes. They're homes to wildlife and plants. So we can't just dismiss them because we're eager to have 23 units. And with all due respect, Katie, the representative, the way you dismiss the comments as, well, it's been planned for 23 units. You did that at the tree committee meeting in a way that stifled and muzzled a very lively and reflective communication among its members. And I appreciate that 2 years of effort is considerable, and the thought of having to go back again to the drawing board, make more adjustments, is a horror for you. But I noticed that Mrs. Dandekar had considered questions and thoughts, and I could see the look in her eyes, and the voice told me she wasn't happy either with cement basins when trees are natural retention centers with their roots. So I am joining the chorus that it is too premature, given the weaknesses in the report, given alternatives that have been made by professional retired people. Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. Thank you, Alan Cooper. Highly advised and making the big effort to share their understanding and concerns. So I'm asking you to consider again, without hasty approval this evening, go back and look at some of these issues and please design a better project for all concerned. And one final comment to have, there are too many, well, I think, well, I'm not sure, well, it could be, well, we expect that, well, I anticipate that. We need to have more certainty about subsequent development on this land, not just the parcel of land tonight, but what happens to it in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, sure.
And did you have another neighbor who wished to speak?
Yes, thank you
Yes.
so kindly for remembering. And I'll let him introduce himself. He's just pulling the chair up to my computer. Thank you all for understanding and accommodating us.
Appreciate it.
All right. Yeah. Thank you very much. I am Adolf Czech, the husband of Genevieve Czech, and like her, I live on 612 Stanford Drive. And my question concerns a very specific and very lovely animal, which is the burrowing owl. As it says on page 17 under Biology 3, the burrowing owl has been recorded in the vicinity of the project from October to the end of April. And it says if initial vegetation removal and site grading for the tract improvements is conducted outside this period, potential effects on the species would be avoided and no further mitigation would be required. Now, the burrowing owl is a special animal. It's a California species of special concern. It's protected under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act of 1916, concluded between the US, Canada, and Mexico. And it is known to undergo non-cyclic population decline. That means independent of any seasons within the life cycle of the animal. In other words, an absolute decline, as well as extreme habitat loss. In all of Central California, only 3 isolated populations are even recorded. One is Central Valley, one is in the Southern Bay Area, and one is at Livermore. So ours is not even known yet. It has been recorded here. So that would be very extra reason to give it extra living space and concern. Now, what it says is that potential would be avoided and no further mitigation would be required. Well, I have done a bit of research, and burrowing owls have high nest fidelity, and the more successful they have had, the more successful breeding they have had in the year before, the higher the fidelity. So if you simply do it outside the breeding period, you are preventing them from coming back. It is not true that no further mitigation would be required. In addition, it then says, let's see, burrowing owls can be discouraged. This is in Biology 4, can be discouraged from using burrows on site, or occupied burrows can be avoided until the owls have left the area. Now, okay. So I would just be very grateful if you would give very special concern, very special attention to the burrowing owl.
Thank you, Mr. Check.
At this time, we have one more member of the public that would like to speak. Eileen Amaral, I will promote you to a panelist now, and you can turn on your video and monitor your mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Great. My name is Eileen Amaral, and I'm the homeowner on Stanford Drive. As you know, we are considered single-family homes, but probably more than 50% of the homes on our street are occupied by renters, and which are predominantly students. And as the homes come on the market on this street, they are trending towards more and more rentals rather than family units. And I bring that up because my concern for this project is the transportation and the vehicular movement on Cuesta and Stanford Drive. I'd like to specifically address the initial study environmental checklist, packet page 107 that you submitted regarding the transportation. And according to the Institute of Transportation Engineers, a single family home generates 9.44 trips per day. And that's assuming that's 2 cars. Well, that, from my math, that equals 217 trips per day on the streets. It's much more likely that these 23 units that are going to be built are going to be rental properties. And we all probably understand that there will be a minimum of 5 tenants. And if we have the addition of the ADUs, it's possible that there could be 1 or 2 more cars. So let's just say there's an average of 6 cars, which is a much more likely scenario than a 2-car home. If that's the case, those 23 homes would equal 28.32 trips per day per home, adding up to 615 trips per day on the 2 streets. It seems like the math that was used and using a trip generation manual from the ITE is flawed. We'd like you to reconsider and redo the math with what the potential of this development could be. The fact that the Planning Commission would use a single family residence as a model with a 2-car assumption is a flawed study. While Stanford Drive and Cuesta Drive would allow for the cheapest and the easiest access to these new homes, we would like to, or my question would be, in the original 1950s development, that Westmont Drive was supposed to go through. I understand that it's less expensive to not put a bridge in over that creek, but that Jeffrey Drive is a much wider thoroughfare than Stanford Drive, and therefore a much safer route for cars to travel. We'd love for that to be reconsidered, as I'm sure it was originally, but we know that profit is probably under consideration here, and how much money could be made off of this development, and also realize that that solution continuing on to Westmont and Jeffrey Drive could be more expensive. While it's true that the city staff can't control who will buy these houses and how they will be occupied, it's also true that they can plan or project that it's very likely that it's going to be student housing. And with the additional ADUs, it could be very likely that there could be 6, 7, 8 tenants per property. That's the trend in this neighborhood. We are very close to both Cuesta College and Cal Poly, and unfortunately, that's how this neighborhood is trending. So we please ask your consideration in this project, knowing that the model that you used is, I would say, pretty inaccurate in what the probability is that what that development is going to turn into. Thank you very much for your consideration. We look forward to hopefully a continuing conversation with you before this is approved.
Thank you. So does that complete the members of the public who wish to speak, as far as we know? Assistant City Clerk?
That's correct. There's nobody else with their hands raised at this time.
Mm-hmm. So I'll bring it back to the Planning Commission for deliberation then. Who'd like to jump in?
Chairman Jorgensen, I think it would be great if staff could respond to some of the public comment and
that's a great idea.
Give you some feedback as you move into deliberations. And I'd like to just make a few comments for the commission's consideration to start out with. First off is just the nature of the project as a housing project, and that being consistent with city council goals, our approach on the project and the evaluation has been to be supportive of housing, and we have been working with the property owners for some time on the design of the subdivision. And this type of subdivision, it's important to understand that with no exceptions being requested and a project that meets all city standards, this is one that falls under the notify level of engagement for the city and for staff. And so in terms of the engagement, while property owners are, that are doing subdivisions, because infill development can be challenging, property owners are encouraged to talk with neighbors and to share plans and to engage. And city staff for a project like this, in order to set accurate expectations for what the engagement and involvement is of neighbors of a project, we have a policy and a manual that guides us to do the particular level of notification that we did for this project. And that notification was accomplished. If it wasn't accomplished, then we'll be back in front of you. We can check that for a third time, but I do want to be clear with the Planning Commission and the community that our notification requirements are that they are requirements, and we have documentation, and the city has all the addresses, and we will go back and make sure that all those postcards were sent to address those concerns. This is a site that I know has been developed in its current form for a long period of time, but I will say that we've just updated the general plan and the zoning regulations, and that zoning of low density residential R1 zoning was confirmed through those processes. So this has long been anticipated as a development site. In fact, it's in the housing element of the city of San Luis Obispo, identifying it as a potential source of additional housing. So that's really important to note. Also, there was a question early on in the meeting about the status of the environmental review, and that we're still in the comment period for the environmental document, and that's true. And so what I want to assure all the members of the public and the Planning Commission tonight is that all of those comments that we've heard tonight are received and will be evaluated to determine if anything needs to change in the environmental document before it's presented to the City Council and recommended for approval. So that's a formal part of the California Environmental Quality Act and the process that we're in tonight, is that all of those statements with respect to amphibians and flood damage and the trees and the burrowing owls and everything that you've heard tonight will be evaluated by staff and make sure that the reports and the analysis in the environmental document is complete before it is recommended to the City Council for approval. So that is formally part of the process. And I guess I would say, in addition to that, is that it's important that if you have questions about any of the findings or the recommendations in front of you tonight, that you do ask those questions. And I would like to make sure, Chairman Jorgensen, that the applicant's team have the opportunity to respond to any specific questions about design, and because really they will be able to answer those questions at a level of detail that I think will be helpful to the Planning Commission. And I assure members of the public too, in terms of the biological report, we do have a biologist on city staff. We also have a natural resources manager who has worked with us in the processing of lots of infill subdivisions like these. Again, it's a project that is consistent with all of the city's property development standards as it relates to subdivisions. And so I think the future quality of development that you see there will be very much like a traditional City of San Luis Obispo neighborhood. So with those comments, Kyle, you might have some additional points to clarify, but just wanted to share those thoughts with the commission and the community. Thank you.
Sure. Go ahead, Kyle, if you'd like, and then I will go back and
sure. There's a couple of things.
Rollins, if she'd like to. respond to anything as well.
Sure. A couple of things. I just want to make sure it was clear that the tree committee did recommend approval based on consistency with tree regulations. So I just want to make sure that's understood, that and that is because of the condition of approval for replanting. The identification of those trees is aside from that recommendation. That's just an additional note from tree committee. It isn't contingent on some sort of not contingent on further evaluation of those trees that were identified. In terms of ADU questions, that's the state of California has deemed that the ADUs are part of single-family residence allotment and development, as all existing single-family residences could add or already have, and they have also stated that there isn't that the cities and policy making cannot consider them an additional impact for any purposes of policy beyond what we already identify for a single family residence. So that's coming from the state. And so I just want to reiterate that that is part of what is a single family residence now. And concerns may be out there, but again, that's from the state. I think I don't have much else to add. I just do want to, again, state like Michael did that the biologist from the applicant is available to answer some of those more specific questions that were raised about biology aspects.
Good. So I'll go back and ask Ms. Rollins if she or one of her team members would like to respond to any of those questions.
Sure, we can respond to specific questions if you guys want to ask them, or one I had written down was regarding the detention basin and how it was going to affect the next door neighbors. And we have to stay on our property, so it won't be affecting any your adjacent slope or anything, and there'll be geotechnical reports to assure that is the case. And we can have our biologist Kevin Merck speak on the burrowing owls if you would like, or we can, whatever you guys want.
Can you speak at all to the question of sort of who owns this responsibility and how it gets carried out? Obviously, if there'll be development agreements once there's a tentative map, I understand that, but certainly the public and maybe the commissioners could all stand to learn a little more about how this is going to play out.
Yeah, so typically what we see is a homeowners association, and that's what we have noted in the plans for the irrigation of the stormwater quality features.
And so, for instance, property owners just to the south of this proposed project are wondering what's it going to look like, what's it going to look like with the walls, what happens in between the walls, how does this all actually appear? It's all going to be very different from what it is right now.
Yeah, so there will be a wall along the property line, and then the underground detention basin will be underground, and then you could plant grass or small shrubs on top of it. And then for the stormwater treatment facilities, those would be above ground and look like planters with special plantings in them that can survive being inundated with water occasionally.
Mm-hmm. Commissioners, are there other questions of the applicant?
I had a question for the biologist. Do you have any sort of comments on the issues that have been raised by residents about the habitat as being more extensive, about the owl? It would be good to know if you have some comments about that.
Yeah,
And
Kevin should still be here and be able to answer those questions.
Right, and Chairman Jorgensen, I wanted to also mention that Bob Hill, the city's natural resources official, is also available if there are any questions for him.
Okay.
Kevin.
Does that work? Am I unmuted?
There you are.
Yeah, there you
Hi.
are.
Thank you, planning commissioners and city staff. Nice to see you remotely. Regarding where should we start? We had the first commenter discussing biological resources was Dr. Schroeder about saying that there were more robust. There was a pond potentially on site with amphibians, and that's just not what we observed. And so on this particular property, it's really an intermittent drainage with no substantial water flowing, possibly after winter rain events, but it's short-lived, and we didn't see any ponds of significant depth that would provide habitat for native amphibian like a California red-legged frog. The burrowing owl, for instance, we have great extensive grasslands surrounding city of San Luis Obispo, but for the burrowing owl, it has been known that it's not breeding in our area since maybe for the last 20 or 30 years. We included it in the biology report because we were concerned that, hey, we did see some ground squirrels on site. It is possible that the species could fly over the site, stop, and maybe forage, but it is such a small area of grassland that we thought it was really unlikely, but we still included it and included protection measures just in case. So that was the thing for the burrowing owl. And any other kind of clarification, or if there's anything you'd like to, ask me or to help get a better answer, by all means, please do so.
Emma, did you want to follow up on that, or?
Michael said the city biologist is here. I was wondering if they had any comments about this, because we're hearing from people who are there 24/7 that, and I understand that, consultants do a good job. They try to evaluate, but I just want to give credence to people who are there on site 24/7, and could we have missed something?
Good evening, Chair Jorgensen and Commissioner Dandekar. I am Bob Hill. I'm the City Sustainability and Natural Resources official. I'm not the city biologist, but we work closely together. I did review the biological report prepared by Kevin Merck Associates. Let me just start off by saying that it is standard practice in an application like this to require of the applicant team to prepare that biological study, and then it is reviewed by city staff to determine if it's of sufficiency and that it's competent and that it appears to be comprehensive and evaluated everything there. I have been on the site twice to walk the creek and observe the property. I would concur with Mr. Merck's comments. I also did not observe pooled water or standing water or the perennial nature of the stream there through the site. It is a handsome riparian area. I'm sure it has lots of habitat for local wildlife. Regarding the burrowing owl, certainly is a species of special concern. It's just a special rare species in general that we should be aware of. Typically, in addition to that grassland habitat, they seem to really prefer a very sandy soil type that's easy to burrow in. The typical process in a biological resources assessment, such as the one that Mr. Merck and his firm prepared, would be to start off doing with a record search of any recorded, documented special status species, whether they be avian or botanical or wildlife species. And in this case, that's usually done through what's called the California Natural Diversity Database, which is promulgated by the California Department of Fish and Wildlife. And so that will allow us to look at all the records of anything that's been recorded by a qualified biologist, but those records go back a long time. And typically an observed and recorded occurrence of a species like that may be as far away as 5 miles away. Particularly with avian species, knowing that they're birds, they can fly around, right? So in this particular case, I think that it absolutely makes sense, and I noted this myself, that we see the burrowing owl
in that CNDDB record search, but that occurrence could be from a long time ago and really from quite some distance away. So what we do here in this case is that we make sure still, despite that when a project like this, if it were to be approved when it goes to construction, that the qualified biologist is there on site observing and has the appropriate protocols in place if a special status species were observed and what to do in those instances.
Thank you for that. That was really helpful.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are there other questions of city staff or the applicant teams?
I have a question.
Yes, Kevin, Nicholas.
I have a question for Mr. Merck. It sounded like Dr. Schroeder had pictures and evidence and maybe videos. I mean, is that going to, if those were supplied, would that change the analysis?
I don't think so. I'd love to see them, and I welcome looking at it, and I would be happy to talk to Mr. Schroeder and discuss where they were seen and et cetera. But we have surveyed numerous locations throughout San Luis Obispo and the greater area, and red-legged frogs have just been significantly reduced. We haven't had any observations except over at the wastewater treatment facility some years ago. But like I said, this is biology. You know, things happen, conditions change. We are in a drought, and we do have excessive non-native species, just like the bullfrog. You know, typically where you have bullfrog, you seldom find red-legged frog, but that's not always the case. So I would welcome pictures, and if there is a protocol for him sharing that information through the city, by all means, where it's all about transparency and a group effort to look at the resources. And from what we had seen during our studies, which were in the spring, and it was following pretty good rain events, we felt that it was unlikely. We still said, hey, even the riparian corridor is still going to be protected, still going to provide wildlife movement, even with the proposed development.
Thank you.
Yeah, Commissioner Quincy, this is definitely an evidence-based process. So any information that can be submitted will be evaluated by city staff, most importantly, as we complete the environmental review. So any photographs, you know, the testimony is very valuable. Any other kind of input that members of the public want to provide, you know, now's the time to do that, and it will be taken under careful consideration. Thanks.
Could I ask you, Michael Cadred, if and when this track map is approved, recommended by the Planning Commission, it'll go to the City Council, and there'll be a public hearing at that time?
That's correct.
And will that be noticed then for this same neighborhood, or how would that be handled?
Yes, it'll be noticed for the same neighborhood, and that notification is also 10 days and for the City Council. And then, you know, with the folks that participated in tonight's meeting, we can, you know, email them the report right when it first comes out. We're happy to, you know, share that link and have people be engaged in the next step of the process as well.
Good. So any further questions from commissioners at this point? Are we good? And then I'll close this part of the hearing. We'll go into commission discussion, deliberation. Who'd like to start? Yes.
I'll go ahead and start it if that's all right.
Go ahead, Nick.
So I somewhat agree with community development director Cadren in the sense that I think the project, it's not asking for any exceptions. I think it meets the major city goals and all the regulations that I've reviewed. Where I'm struggling with this project is recommending adopting a mitigated negative declaration where it sounds like the environmental analysis is still in flux. So I'm not quite comfortable recommending an adoption of an environmental document that has not been completely evaluated. So those are my thoughts.
And just to respond by asking Kyle, are there options for us that you can see to separate the two?
You're on mute, Kyle.
Yeah, in terms of recommending one without the other. I don't think that's an option.
No, this is Tyler. Not just jumping in. It's not an option, but the recommendation obviously includes careful consideration, as Michael Cadron mentioned, of all the public comments that we've received, full evaluation of those, and making any additional adjustments or analysis needed in the environmental document to make it, meet requirements. And so that would be a part of your recommendation, and that is something that we'd continue to focus on and complete.
And Commissioner Quincy, I do understand that concern, so I do want to recognize that that's a policy or a practice, I should say, that the Community Development Department has followed in the past. In the past, planning commissioners have been comfortable with that, because what we're able to do is, use this input that we receive at this meeting as comments formally towards completing the environmental document, as opposed to presenting something, that is a fait accompli, so that input doesn't get factored in as much, or, if changes happen at that time, it could require, a subsequent hearing in any case. So it's clearly the purview of the commission if it wants to wait for the public comment period to close. And I just wanted to explain that, why we do it that way, and that's our normal practice.
Yeah, and I completely understand it. It's just that I'm just a little uncomfortable recommending adoption of a document that could change. I just don't, it doesn't sound like the analysis has been completed, but I get what you're saying.
Other comments?
I have a few thoughts, if I may.
Please.
First of all, I think, unfortunately, the project before us represents a missed opportunity to consider a more flexible and creative design for the site. I think this site is really a good opportunity to use the plan development process so that the creek and the surrounding area could be preserved better. And in exchange, the eastern portion of the site could be developed with smaller lots. And I think that would better protect the riparian corridor. I'm not saying the riparian corridor isn't protected to some extent with this development, or maybe to a large extent, but I think that kind of a configuration of development could have better protected the riparian corridor, could have reduced the amount of grading in the riparian corridor, and could have also preserved more trees than the current proposal. But that's a different process, and I'm not suggesting that the applicants start over again and go through a zoning change and the plan development process. But I think, unfortunately, there's a missed opportunity here. And I think it would be nice, and I don't think there's a provision for it in the zoning regulations, but it would have been nice if there's options for more flexible design like that without having to go through a zone change, where we could get smaller lots and a transfer of density from one portion of the site to another without a lot of hurdles to go through. But anyway, having said that, I think the site obviously represents infill development. That's good. It's consistent with city goals and the land use and circulation element. The site and the design are consistent with the subdivision regulations, as we've heard. It's generally consistent with the land use element, the circulation element, and the conservation element, except I think it could have done a better job and paid more attention to protecting the riparian area and some of the significant trees that we've been hearing about. So I'm a little uncomfortable with the lack of attention to trying to work around some of the, especially some of the larger and major trees, and some of the native trees as well on the site. And I understand that there's detention basin or retention areas in the way, but I think some of the trees could be preserved with some more creative design and grading work For example, trees 33 and 34, those were the really large eucalyptus trees. And there may be the redwood trees as well. Anyway, so I'm a little uncomfortable with the current design. I mean, one option is to reduce some lots on the western side of the creek. I don't know if I'm going to suggest that, or if or if other commissioners would go along with that, because this is infill development. We want to maximize opportunities for infill development. But I'd like to hear from other commissioners. I might have a couple suggestions on tree protection and maybe a replacement ratio for trees to increase it above 1 to 1. But I'm still a little uncomfortable with the attention being paid to tree protection and riparian corridor. So those are my thoughts for now. And I do kind of agree with Commissioner Quincy's concern about the environmental review and it not being completed or finalized yet before the commission takes action or makes a recommendation to the city council. So I can sympathize with that, although I'm generally comfortable with what I've heard from the city staff in response to the questions raised. I understand that the comment period is still open, that the initial study could still be changed, and yet we would have made a recommendation. So I understand that sentiment, and I kind of sympathize with that as well. So those are my comments for now, but I may have a couple suggestions depending on what other commissioners have to say.
Thank you. Emma?
So I too was worried about that, which is why my first question was about CEQA's, the period not being over yet. So I share Commissioner Wolkin and Commissioner Quincy's concerns about it coming into this. And I agree also about the unease of the level of protection for trees. It's a beautiful site when you go onto it, and we pride ourselves so much on the scenic qualities of our city, and I was wondering why we couldn't have somehow incorporated ways that through the riparian corridor, or somehow sort of access to people might have been enhanced in some way to that site. But the other thing that I'm concerned about, which I think may be slightly different, and maybe commissioners won't share my concern, but when you talk about the street grid for the city as a whole, and you look at this map, not knowing a whole lot about it, when you think about sort of improving and developing this property, connecting up Westmore seems like the logical thing to do. Yes, there's a riparian corridor, but we do tend to bridge over things like that. And there are ways to bridge without damaging the ecology any significantly necessarily. And when you drive up Stanford, which I did, I drove up both the access roads. Stanford particularly is very impacted. You have to navigate it carefully right now. And so this plan suggests that the bulk of traffic go down Stanford or Questa in a loop. Urban planning has been getting away from these cul-de-sac-like environments because they can be problematic for a variety of ways. And it seems like we are creating such a thing when in fact, if Westmore was connected all the way across, it becomes another sort of east-west connection, which I think that part of town could use because there is a lot of traffic with students and so on. And it is difficult to navigate through. So that was my concern.
I guess I'll weigh in as well. I share that concern. And, I think it sounds like in some ways we're all of somewhat mixed mind here. The general case for infill is absolutely there. And infill is one side of the coin. The other side is open space and real boundaries that we really hold to. And this is exactly a case where that's what's happening. This is infill right up against the line there. But it seems like we don't know what kind of housing will be developed there. There's certainly a lot of demand for single family housing as well. So we just don't know, but there will be more traffic, and it's going to be part of sort of a convoluted set of things with those two streets that are definitely impacted. There's no question about it. So it just it does seem awkward. There's nothing, the numbers that were presented by one of the persons testifying tonight is generally accurate. It's 9 to 10 trips per day per unit, and it certainly will be adding to the congestion there. So it's a difficult situation. I would say there could be a lot less creative solutions than the loop with Stanford and Cuesta, but it certainly isn't a perfect situation. When I think about the trees, in some ways it seems like we're back in Sherwood Forest waiting for Robin Hood to pop out. We're talking about the breast height diameter and what kind of axe you got that you can reach that. And we're not yet able to, the science really isn't there yet to really look, for instance, at the carbon storage and sequestration such that we could actually map out what it would take to at least duplicate the kind of carbon sink that we've got there now, and in X number of years, and maybe even overdo it a little in terms of the number of trees that are replanted, maybe along Mike Welkin's idea, so that you kind of pay back the missing carbon storage. We're just not there yet. I don't think the science, I've kind of dug in a little bit, and the science isn't quite there to be able to pull that off, but over the next few years it will be. So I don't have a good solution there either. So I myself am a mixed mind. I absolutely support the infill. I can see this meets requirements. They did what they were asked to do. It's just such a special parcel that it leaves me wanting. So that's where I am right now.
Commissioner Jorgensen, may I ask staff a question?
Please.
Yeah, this is regarding the comments about a connection to Westmont. I was wondering, maybe this is best for the city's engineer, for Mr. Hanula. Would it be possible to make a connection to Westmont going out to Highway 1 and then configure the intersection of Highway 1 and Westmont to only allow right turn out and no right turn in, so as to reduce the possibility of cut-through traffic?
Well, I think that's a good question for Mr. Schwartz.
Yeah, exactly. If Luke's available.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Hey, this is Luke Schwartz. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, yeah. Great question. One thing I'd like to note is that intersection is controlled by Caltrans, so it's not necessarily within the city's authority to make changes to the intersection. I also want to highlight that when the Cal Poly master plan update was going through outside agency review several months ago, Caltrans actually commented on concerns with adding any traffic to that intersection because of safety concerns related to having a high-speed uncontrolled intersection. So I know there's other geometric and topographic challenges associated with punching that through to that street, but there's also concerns with adding more traffic to that intersection as it exists today.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to just also add that, Kyle shared in his presentation, just in terms of consistency with general plan policy, that those kinds of street network changes that cause more cut through traffic in neighborhoods where we've been talking about sort of how narrow the street is, and just that the character of the street as it is right now is not encouraged. And so, these infill development projects, they are challenging. And Commissioner Wolkin, in terms of sort of the concept about a more creative subdivision design, that was certainly discussed with the property owners and the applicants early on when they met with staff, and we had the opportunity to look at the property and give some feedback. And that's the kind of feedback that we provided in terms of what was possible there with clustering and different options. And they came back after years of evaluating the design, and really are focused on a subdivision that just simply complies with city standards and follows the neighborhood pattern in terms of the lotting pattern and the circulation pattern. And so that's just a little bit of background on that too. Now, there are only 4 planning commissioners here tonight, so I know that that's maybe challenging. And so in terms of the testimony that I've heard so far, or sorry, the comments from commissioners, I'm not sure that there is a majority to move this forward with a recommendation to the city council tonight or not. I would say if anybody wants to try a motion to that effect, that would be a good opportunity to see where the commission stands. Yep. But if there is a concern about the time frames with respect to the environmental review or something else that is going to prevent a majority, 3 votes to move this forward to the city council tonight, then we should bring it back, without more delay, so that all 7 planning commissioners have the opportunity to evaluate.
Sounds good. Someone ready with a motion? Nick, how about you?
Well, sure, I'll take a stab at it, but I think I'm going to recommend bringing it back. So I don't know if there's enough support for that.
I hesitated to put that on the table, but that was my thought too. I feel I'm not ready to move this forward, given everything I've heard. I'd really appreciate having the viewpoint of my other fellow commissioners because of this. And to also, now that the community has been notified, if we bring it back, there will be opportunity for others also who may not have had time to reflect on this proposal to be able to have their say.
So if we produce a motion that continues this, we need to be very specific about the reasons. So one reason could relate to the EIR, to the, not the EIR, but the...
And Chairman Jorgensen, I think we've heard the entire conversation tonight and have that documented, and I think that we can respond to all the questions raised in a pretty straightforward manner with a follow-up report.
Mm-hmm.
Commissioner Jorgensen, I'd like to second that motion with the direction that staff...
I didn't hear a motion yet. I wasn't the one really proposing it.
I thought there was a motion. I'm sorry.
Oh, well...
I'll take a stab at it. I'll make a motion to continue this matter. Do we need to make a date certain? Michael, do you have a date certain that we could recommend bringing it back?
Tyler might, yeah.
So I guess my question would be to Kyle on when the environmental review period closes for comments, because that will dictate, obviously, when we can bring this back.
I thought he said in 2 days.
It's within the next, yeah, I think it's.
So if it's in 2 days, I would say that the date certain would be the June 23rd date, if you were looking for a date certain.
Okay. I'll make a motion to continue this matter to the June 23rd Planning Commission meeting for completion of environmental review, incorporating all comments received at today's Planning Commission meeting and giving the opportunity for public comment to close.
I'll second the motion if the motion maker will accept an amendment, and that would be to direct staff to work with the applicant to try to look at alternative grading concepts to preserve as many large trees as possible.
My motion is so amended.
So we have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion?
Do other commissioners feel the need for more information on the traffic conditions on the site and the proposed layout of the sort of street and the impacts on the streets that will be the main connectors?
Commissioner Dandekar, I do, and I think that I would hope that staff would conduct that analysis pursuant to the way that we've worded the motion already. I don't know if you're comfortable with the language though. Because I'm assuming that the transportation and traffic impacts would be encompassed within the environmental review, I guess is what I'm saying.
But that's only for the next 2 or 3 days, right? That the comments and then it'll close.
Well, correct, but I would assume that staff could still conduct that analysis prior to June 23rd. I would hope, anyways.
We've heard the whole conversation regarding the street connections and traffic and the conditions on Stanford and the way that both the public testimony and the response of the Planning Commission. So we'll be addressing all of those points in the next hearing.
And thank you for that.
Yeah.
Any other questions, comments? Are we ready to vote?
I just wanted to thank Director Codron for mentioning that there was discussion with the applicant early on about the options for more flexible design. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, because I know that staff too are limited in what can be asked for that you can suggest. But so I appreciate hearing that staff was in dialogue with the applicant to suggest alternatives, because in so many ways it does seem like a lost opportunity for a really beautiful part of the city to be available to in some way.
Yeah, I think that it's important to think about, that the idea about the connectivity. I understand that as a planner, and I think that if this was a property with its proximity to Highway 1, that if it had full access, like if that was a signalized intersection, then this is a property that certainly could connect through and could also support a lot more density, most likely, given the city's housing goals and what we're trying to do with infill development. But it's just, we did look at that and we did talk with the applicants about that, and that seemed to be far more objectionable with respect to city policies for neighborhood quality and what we'd expect the neighbors to sort of tolerate. So this is in some ways the least objectionable design, given what the neighborhood concerns would be. So,
yep, it's real time. Let's vote. Gary, Assistant City Clerk, can you call the roll?
Vice Chair Quincy,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolkin,
Yes.
Commissioner Dondekar,
Yes.
Chair Jorgensen.
Yes.
Motion passes.
So it passes unanimously. I see it's 8:30. Should we take a little break? Maybe 10 minutes, 8:40?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I think we can mute ourselves. Kevin, are we ready to jump back in?
Absolutely.
So can I do that?
Let me just state for the record that all the commissioners present at the beginning of the meeting have returned and are present for the remainder of the meeting now.
Good. So in reconvening, we're ready for item 3, which is a review of the city's public draft of Parks and Recreation Blueprint for the future, 2021 to 2041. So we'll have a public hearing, and I think we're ready to open that. Let's see. I think we'll start. Yeah, we'll do that. We're opening a public hearing, and we're asking for a presentation from Senior Planner Shauna Scott.
All right, I wanted to get this set up. Thank you so much, Chair Jorgensen and Planning Commissioners. Tonight before you, as you stated, is a review of the draft Parks and Recreation Blueprint for the future, 2021 to 2041. This plan consists of the Parks and Recreation Plan and a general plan element update to the Parks and Recreation element. I'd like to present Greg Avakian. He's the Parks and Recreation Director for the City of San Luis Obispo, and he will kick off this presentation, and then I will pick it up again shortly. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Shauna. I'm just having a little trouble getting shifted over, so thanks for your patience, everybody. Commissioners, thank you for entertaining our subject matter this evening. I'm Greg Avakian, Director for Parks and Recreation, and again, have been working with our Senior Planner, Shauna Scott, for the past few years in a couple different capacities on what we usually call a master plan, where Parks and Recreation Department has relabeled it as a blueprint for the future. So thank you, Commissioner Jorgensen, or Chair Jorgensen, for bringing that in as our title tonight. We're very proud to kind of sort of shift into this new mode. On our next slide, well, there we go. So tonight we're really hoping to present to you again some content and background, as well as some updates from our public outreach, and have the commission hopefully adopt a resolution to then forward to the City Council. This has been a team effort over a 3-year period, and it started with the previous Parks and Recreation Director and current Assistant City Manager, Shelley Stanwyck, myself, again, Senior Planner Shauna Scott, Recreation Managers, both Devin Highfield and Lindsay Stevenson, who were instrumental in doing a lot of our community outreach over the past 3 years. And then a trusted, as you can see here, compilation of staff from administrative analysts to our communications coordinator to really get our outreach and our budget analysis and communications with our consultants taken care of. The key part of this was, again, working with our consultant team, the WRT Design, Pros Consulting, ETC Institute, and our local Wallace Group and LSA Associates to help kind of put our draft document together at this point. Again, kind of the process that you're all familiar with, I believe, is our Parks and Recreation Commission is our lead advisory body to support the Parks and Recreation Department. They have played an instrumental role and have been along with the ride for this this project since day one. City Council and the support from our other city advisory bodies such as the ATC, and we're looking forward to now working more closely with a lot of our stakeholders such as our community groups, sport groups, youth and senior services groups, and obviously our community in general with our public outreach and our public forums with virtual workshops the past year and a half, but more importantly, just really getting them engaged and providing the proper feedback to get us to this point where we are tonight. And at this point, I'll turn it over back to Shauna Scott, who will run through our presentation, and we'll be able to entertain questions as we move along and at the end.
All right, thank you so much, Greg. So I wanted to highlight why we are updating this plan. This is identified as a top priority for the Parks and Recreation Commission. The current combined element and master plan was last updated in 2001. It's currently very out of date and has very minimal usefulness. There's a need for policy direction and updated data related to current and future needs. This plan also presented a great opportunity to plan the future with our community for the next 20 years to really provide what they'd like to see and what's needed related to Parks and Recreation. The plan also addresses the operational needs, life cycle of amenities, and also considers adaptability to climate change. Another component of the plan is that it addresses the needs of our community, including sustainable transportation and diversity, equity, and inclusion. The scope of this update consists of a full repeal and replace of the 2001 plan and element. I wanted to highlight that. That's why you're not seeing what you sometimes see when there are other smaller changes to documents where you might see what's called a legislative draft with strike-throughs and add-ins. This is really a full replacement of that current document. It consists of two components. The Parks and Recreation Plan includes chapters 1 through 3 and chapter 5. And then the component of the plan that is the Parks and Recreation element is chapter 4, which identifies the goals and policies. Also important as part of this update, we have completed our environmental review process. This document that you see in your packet is a programmatic initial study. The initial study concluded that there would not be significant effects on the environment. That's why you're seeing a negative declaration. And I'll go into a little more detail about our approach to that and why this is a programmatic document. Another thing I wanted to highlight as well is that this plan specifically addresses parks and recreation in our urban environment. Our city currently has a conservation and open space element, as your commission is well aware. That document is the appropriate document that contains the policies for designated open space uses. It's used as a tool to protect and preserve unique community resources. Really, its overarching goal is to protect those environmental resources. The Parks and Recreation element does not alter or update any of those policies or plans or programs in the conservation and open space element. It does not include any uses or policies related to open space. So some of the significant changes I wanted to highlight is that this plan addresses both the resident and the daytime or service population, the service population related to jobs. There was a very deliberate intention for this document to be very aspirational and visionary. And also the intent of this plan is to really achieve a strong public buy-in through future-focused park and facility plans and community engagement associated with each of those park-specific plans. Wanted to note that not every potential park-specific amenity opportunity identified in Chapter 5, the implementation chapter, will be identified in those subsequent park-specific plans. This plan is intended to provide the flexibility to meet parkland and amenity needs citywide. The amenity needs in the plan are informed by the city's current inventory, our estimated daytime or service population, community engagement, which we've conducted over the past 3 years, We also looked at recreational trends and some guidance from our consultant related to that. And also it's been informed by advisory body recommendations and direction. The location of future amenities will be guided by use of a sub-area map, which I will show in this presentation, with the intention of achieving the policy of equitable distribution of amenities throughout the city. We also looked at population density within residential neighborhoods and identification of access gaps, really looking at limited or lack of access via sustainable transportation and distance from neighborhoods. The plan addresses the changing needs of our community, such as new sports, activities, and interests, and really goes beyond recreation with a focus on community building. There is an intentional focus to advance and support sustainable transportation, as identified in our adopted active transportation plan, carbon neutrality in alignment with our climate action plan, and also including advancing and supporting our evolving understanding of our community's diversity, equity, and inclusion needs. Do a quick run through these 3 years of community engagement. We started with some foundational stakeholder interviews and then proceeded to conduct 25 pop-up events at different parks, facilities, and events throughout the spring and summer of 2018. We held our first public workshop, our Bright Ideas public workshop, in September of 2018. Our consultants conducted a statistically valid needs assessment survey in the fall of 2018. And then we had a workshop series with the Parks and Recreation Commission, January through March of 2019. This was followed by a community needs assessment workshop where staff and the consultant presented the results of the community needs assessment report, followed by a park improvement priorities workshop, and then kind of concluding this March of 2021 with our public draft plan public workshop. In addition to all of those formalized events, we've held multiple Parks and Recreation Commission meetings where the public was invited to provide comments. We've made comment cards available for people to pick up at facilities and at the Parks and Recreation office and mail those in or hand those to staff. We've had 2 opportunities for people to provide public comments online through Open City Hall. We've made ourselves available to go out into neighborhoods and actually, meet people where they are. And one neighborhood group did take us up on that. We went out there and met with them. We generated a substantial interested parties list where we could notify people through email that upcoming hearings are coming up, and then gives them an opportunity to provide public comment. We've also put out information through the city social media channels. And then there's been several opportunities of direct communications with staff. So I'll go ahead and provide an overview here of the plan. Chapter 1 is really the introduction, and it presents the themes. It starts on page 2 of the plan. The guiding themes, which permeate throughout the plan's recommendations, goals, and policies, include design excellence, stewardship and sustainability, inclusion and access, building community, partnerships and public engagement, and good governance. Chapters 2 and 3 of the plan identify really kind of a summary of the community needs. Chapter 2 provides the demographics of our city based on available data, and also includes the inventory of parks and amenities. Chapter 3 is really the culmination summary of all the public workshops and all the other avenues of public comment where we received great feedback from our community that really helped shape this plan. Chapter 4 is the goals and policies. It's the general plan element component of the plan. The goals identified here, I can certainly pull up the plan if your commission would like to focus on any specific policies, but for your purposes of this presentation right now, I'll highlight the goals that we've identified in the element, including build community and neighborhoods, meet the changing needs of the community, sustainability, optimize resources, and safety. And like I mentioned, I can certainly come back to this wording if you'd like to take another look. Chapter 5 is the implementation chapter. It lays out what the city needs in terms of recreational amenities. It provides a framework for locating those amenities in existing and future parks. and identifies near-term, midterm, and long-term project opportunities. The needs and priorities identified in that chapter were determined by 3 years of community feedback, use of recreation amenity standards to determine the projected need for additional future amenities, identification of access gaps and other inequities, and direction and guidance from our Parks and Recreation Commission. This chapter documents the potential improvements at each park where those visionary changes are needed, such as a full update to a park plan or developing a comprehensive plan for a specific park. It links needed park amenities with park sites where those amenities would be best suited to fit local needs. It identifies the acreage of new parkland and where we should look for some additional future park sites within the city, and also identifies the costs of park improvements and a funding strategy for capital improvements, programming, maintenance, and operations. The key park amenity needs that we've identified in our plan include athletic fields, sports courts, indoor facilities, dog parks and off-leash dog areas, playgrounds, and outdoor gathering and seating areas, and other special recreational facilities. This section of the plan, starting on page 106, really describes the inventory of these key amenities, identifies the additional need, highlights some access gaps, and identifies priority. You'll see in this section, starting on page 136, that the park and facility needs and priorities are grouped by park classification and are then presented in alphabetical order. The project opportunity priorities are identified by phase, such as near term, which is 0 to 5 years, midterm, 5 to 10 years, and the long term, 10 to 20 years. These opportunities and priorities are summarized in table 5-1, which is on page 136. So I first wanted to just provide a brief description of these different types of parks that you see in the plan. Community parks are diverse in character. They provide unique features and a wide range of amenities which attract users from throughout the city. The city currently has 7 community parks totaling about 100 acres. So some of the vision, I'll highlight here some of the visionary opportunities that we've identified for each of these park areas. The plan goes into more detail and more description of these different opportunities, but I just wanted to highlight these here. For Laguna Lake Park, we currently have a Laguna Lake plan. And so this document would not replace that plan, but it does call for a comprehensive update to that plan. So the current plan for Laguna Lake would remain in place until that plan is updated. One thing we really noted with this area out here at Laguna Lake, which I also wanted to highlight, does not include the more natural area, kind of past the dog, the off-leash dog area and the wetland area. This is all limited to kind of the grass playground area, really extending from that location, kind of where the fencing is over by the gazebo, all the way out to Madonna Road. So just wanted to be clear that what we're looking at is not proposing any modification to the more natural area. One thing we really heard for this location here is that we really need to consider the trade-offs. What uses are to remain, what uses should be discontinued, and what new uses should be incorporated into this area. Really looking at a mix of passive and active uses. Some of these opportunities we've identified here are to revitalize the connection to the aquatic environment of really highlighting the lake itself, continued community events, improvements to the existing off-leash dog area, or really turning that into a formalized dog park. This was identified as a potential opportunity site for a multi-generational community center or an aquatic swim center. And then some active uses, including fields and courts, and passive uses such as a botanical garden or a nature center. Looking to Meadow Park, including the Meadow Park Center and Exposition Park, this site was also identified as a location in need of a comprehensive phased plan. Some of the opportunities we've identified here include increased programming and special events, some turf or field upgrades and reconfiguration of those areas, This location was identified as a potential opportunity site for a multi-generational community center. We've also noted the need for improved walking paths and fitness equipment, expansion of the playground, incorporation of a dog park, and also provision of increased shade. Looking to the Sinsheimer area, what we heard from the Parks and Recreation Commission when we're looking at these different areas separately is that, you know, they provided some really good guidance that this area really calls for a comprehensive phase plan, looking at this area as a whole, because these uses interact so much with each other, the park, the stadium, and the swim center. So some of the opportunities we've called for here include increased programming, improved access and connection to the railroad safety trail and the future bridge identified in the active transportation plan, incorporation of a dog park, tennis and pickleball courts. Again, this larger area was identified as a potential opportunity for a multi-generational community center. And also just wanted to highlight, we're looking at having one center in the city and we've identified multiple sites where that could occur. There's also a need for stadium improvements and upgrades, or future full renovation of the facility or a new facility. Also identified opportunities for multi-use fields, expansion or redesign of the Slow Swim Center, and potential land acquisition as, for example, the Slow Swim Center is on school district property, and it limits some of the use of that area. Moving on to neighborhood parks. Neighborhood parks are typically convenient and accessible, active, and provide convenient and accessible active and passive recreation to residents within about 1/2 to 1 mile walking distance. San Luis Obispo currently has 10 neighborhood parks totaling about 35 acres. Some of the opportunities we've identified here for Emerson Park. The city has a conceptual Emerson Neighborhood Park revitalization project. I believe it's received some grant funding related to improvements there. This site was also identified as kind of considering this as a possible alternative location for the community center. Looking to Mitchell Park in our downtown, this site also is in need of a plan, and really some opportunities here are, first starting with engaging with the community and having those neighborhood discussions regarding safety, continuing special events within this park, expanded programming for activation, and also really looking at multi-generational activation through amenities and community gatherings with the senior center being adjacent to this location. To this park. Looking to Chang Park, the opportunities we've identified here has a spatial redesign for safety, visibility, and activation, increased downtown activation and programming, improved cultural expression and educational opportunities, and also, especially we've heard this through public comment through our process, which has been so important to this process, to really maintain the cultural significance of the original design. Looking to Mission Plaza, we didn't expand beyond the Mission Plaza concept plan because that plan has been endorsed by council. So really, it's about ongoing programming and activation in this space, and just continuing with the implementation of that concept plan. Looking to recreation centers and facilities, these types of facilities provide organized or programmed recreation, and also provide an opportunity for multi-generational community gathering and support. Looking to our Ledwick Community Center, there's opportunities here to renovate the facility for indoor recreation or restructuring it as multi-generational community center, incorporating after-school childcare, possibly incorporating staff offices, and possibly relocating some of the existing programs at the SLO Senior Center to this facility, or possibly, as mentioned, earlier in the presentation, just kind of replacing this facility with a new facility elsewhere in the city. And looking to the SLO Senior Center, just heard a lot of support from the community for some multi-generational use, provision of diverse programming, possibly augmenting with some child youth activities to provide that generational connection, considering rentability of the facility, addressing the functionality and maintenance, and also providing a greater connection to the adjacent open outdoor space in the park. Looking to the Laguna Lake Golf Course, some opportunities here include alternative programming, such as maybe disc golf, foot golf, community days in the park, incorporating more community events in this space, kind of looking at the golf course as a potential source of financial contribution, and then also development or updating a facility plan related to maintenance, operation, and programming. Looking to the Railroad Safety Trail, some opportunities here include potential adjacent bike or skate pump track, improved park connections and railroad fencing, and then providing that railroad overcrossing consistent with the active transportation plan to include sustainable transportation access to this park from other areas in the city. So now that I've run through the plan, I wanted to touch on our compliance with CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. We did see the public comment related to this issue, and I just wanted to highlight we did prepare a programmatic environmental document, which was the appropriate document to prepare based on the details that we have. Also, these documents are appropriate as cited here from the guidelines. It's really like the plan is one large project, and it's all related, geographically, which is, within the urban areas of the city, logical parts in the chain of contemplated actions, in connection with issuance of rules, regulations, plans, or other general criteria. And also, these different park plans that will be tiered off of this plan will be considered, individual activities that will be carried out under the same authorizing statutory or regulatory authority and having generally similar environmental effects, which can be mitigated in similar ways. As noted, we'll be using this document with later activities where we can tier from, or because we'll have so many more details with the park specific plans, such as location of amenities, whether amenities are lighted or unlighted, whether there's amplified sound, how much grading would be required. All of those details would come out of those park specific plans, which would be initiated with extensive community engagement to make sure we're really providing the right amenities within parks that, that especially the neighbors and other people that use those facilities want to see. And so what we would do is we take a look at this document, and then, I envision, because there'll be so many more details coming out, that we'd be preparing those tiered environmental documents that would all go through the public review process with opportunity for public comment. So for a good example of this is, for example, a comprehensive update to the Laguna Lake plan. Provided a couple tables in the agenda report that highlight some comments that we've received through prior review of this public draft plan, and also in areas where our plan has been amended for your commission's consideration as you formulate your recommendation to City Council. I wanted to highlight first, I'll touch on some of the more straightforward comments that we heard when we went to the City Council for a study session on May 4th. And as noted in the agenda report, we discussed kind of where we've made those edits and where we've considered these comments. So one of the comments we heard is to really make sure there are very clear distinctions about open space and open public spaces and places and urban trails. The council also directed staff to remove the reference to providing a second golf course within the city. There were comments to update opportunities for Chang Park, which you see in the plan. And also there was a comment to clarify if the multi-generational center would also be a multicultural center. As explained in the report, the multicultural element would really come through programming and how that facility would be used. The plan has been updated as you see in your packet to clearly explain and clarify the results of community engagement. one of the comments we received from council is to consider park ambassadors to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we've identified in the report like how how that may be considered. It's very resource based, facility based, and activity based. And also, we certainly intend to conduct additional focused outreach related to diversity, equity, and inclusion. The city has a DEI task force that will be a great tool. Assuming that the budget is passed as presented, we'll have a DEI office. And so these will be great resources for staff to really have that focused engagement with groups that may not always be showing up at public meetings and need staff to really go out to them for some input. Another comment from council that didn't quite specifically relate to the plan is really looking for, what's called like quick build projects, kind of relating to what we already have, kind of what can we start implementing, this year, and Greg can probably go into a little more detail, but a lot of it is really contingent on what's in our current CIP. And I don't know, Greg, if you wanted to touch on that quickly.
Happy to. Thank you, Shauna. Yeah, this was sort of a comment near the end of the City Council study session on, I think, again, we've been waiting for 3.5 years really to kind of move forward with a lot of projects. We wanted to wait until this blueprint was completed. So I think the community and the council are eager to get some things moving quickly. So they just had some ideas on what we might be able to do. And a lot of these are already in our CIP for some improvements to the parks, and others are not on the CIP list that we would have to either reprioritize some projects or look for some additional funding or resources. But these are kind of ideas that we also as staff believe would be in that 0 to 5 years, but really that 0 to 2 year type launch, and could be like a higher priority amongst the near term priorities that have already been identified.
Thank you, Greg. So now we get to a couple of the more meatier comments. The council was taking a look at our policies and standards related to provision of parkland. Our current general plan identifies a standard of 10 acres per 1,000 residents. And so we wanted to maintain that. The Parks and Recreation Commission was very clear that they would like to see this standard maintained in this plan. And then council wanted to look at, hey, what kind of standards are you using for current and future amenity needs? And how we address this is we really are recognizing that it's not just the resident population that's using recreational amenities within the city. So what we did is we took a look back at the Nexus study that was prepared to identify appropriate fees, and in that Nexus for the city's fee, master fee program, and that study identified that daytime population based on jobs in the city, and so that that was a solid number that we used to estimate how many of what type of amenity should be provided over the next 20 years to serve that population, knowing that those facilities are used not just by residents. The other comment that we received is looking at the sub-area map, which I'll be pulling up on the screen, in consideration of dividing the Meadow and Sinsheimer sub-area into 2 separate sub-areas. So I'll show you here, this is figure 4.2, which is on page 85 of the plan. This is the current figure for that, showing the different sub-areas, identifying these general areas, which include each area includes multiple neighborhoods, but really wanting to use this tool for equitable distribution of amenities. But we're not just using this sub-area map. We also wanted to take, we're also taking into consideration the information that's on the access gap map in the plan. And so what we've created here is that kind of referenced updated plan, and I can zoom in. I know it's probably a lot of detail there on your screen, where we wanted to highlight not only those sub areas, but also showing other information that will be used to cite amenities in the city, such as these, the yellow areas, which identify some access gaps based on population density and based on walkable distance, areas that are, greater than about a 10-minute or a half half-mile distance, 10-minute walk from various neighborhoods. So all this information really needs to be used in conjunction to make sure that amenities aren't all located in just one area of the city, but are really providing that access to all the different neighborhoods in the city. We also took this plan to the Active Transportation Committee. I won't read all of these, but we'll certainly be glad to come back to them. I think all of these comments, as identified in the staff report, they were all make great comments, and so we've incorporated those edits into the current draft plan. And finally, on May 12th, we went to our Parks and Recreation Commission. The Parks and Recreation Commission recommended adoption of the plan update with noted clarifications by staff. A lot of those were just cleanup items, and also we presented to them how we intended to address city council comments and other public comments. The Parks and Recreation Commission specifically recognized that this plan update is aspirational. They considered the city council study sessions, and as noted, they recommended retainment of the 10 acres per 1,000 resident parkland standard, retainment of those sub-area delineations, so not dividing up one of the sub-areas into two, and also supported staff's clarification regarding use of the access gap amenities map as shown kind of with those sub-areas overlaid on that map. And then they also supported those additional city council study session comments, which have been incorporated into the current plan. So really our next step here, following your commission's consideration and recommendation, we're currently scheduled to go to the city council for the council to consider adoption of the final plan and the environmental document that's currently scheduled for July 6th. And we'll go ahead and kind of conclude this presentation, kind of reiterating staff's recommendation for the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending the City Council approve the draft plan and adopt the associated initial study negative declaration. And so Greg and I are certainly available for any questions your commission may have. Chair Jorgensen, I think you're muted. If you're...
Try that again. Very nice presentation, both of you. You covered a lot of ground.
It's a lot.
Sure. So are there questions from commissioners to Greg or to Shauna?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead, Mike.
First of all, how significant or heavy is the use of our park facilities by the daytime population, other than maybe for using parks for walking trails or picnic areas for lunch? Is there really a significant use by the daytime population?
Fantastic question, Commissioner Wilkin. It is a challenge to measure because it fluctuates depending on the time of year and the weather and all those things as well. But I think we got to consider we have our dog park area, we have our tennis courts, our pickleball courts, our swim center facility. We have basketball courts. A lot of lunchtime and after work activities occur in there. We have a lot of people on the weekends that come in to town from our neighboring cities. If it's Los Osos or Pismo Beach or Rio Grande, they kind of mix both. Let's say Sinsheimer Playground, for example, they might come for a blues game, but also stick around and then use the facility for disc golf or the playground area. A lot of our what we're calling seated gathering areas, the picnic areas, our stats show a good mix of both in-city addresses as well as outside the city addresses for those rentals. And so it's a tough one to completely gauge and have a solid formula, but we definitely know there's an impact. We also considered Cal Poly, and we have a formula a little bit on that one where it's about a third of the campus population that also utilizes the city amenities. I think our largest challenge has really been this past year and a half or so of COVID. In the pandemic, we've seen a major increase in our park usage by both our own community as well as external community, as people were trying to just kind of do more outdoor activities with family or with their friends. And so we've definitely have a major impact that we've noticed in our community and neighborhood parks that weren't quite as significant 3 years ago when we started doing our assessments.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. One other question. I noticed in the plan there seems to be an emphasis on youth programs and activities, and also mention of a proposal for a multi-generational center. I just wanted to be assured that we're not de-emphasizing programs and opportunities for seniors when we're emphasizing programs for youth.
No, it's a balance. Yes, obviously our focus is on both of those populations. We have currently a small, what we consider a smaller size, square footage wise, of a senior center at Mitchell Park. It is limited, and there's a lot of ranges in what we consider seniors. We call them active adults. So you have the 55 to 65 that are maybe a little more active. You have a 65 to 75 that are kind of a blend, and we have a 75 and older that are more of our traditional users of the current senior center, and what the activities they do within that facility. And we're kind of considering all that. So our community might not be considered senior population, but we're looking at the active adult population, really from that 50, which is, I'm in that age range now, 50 and up is considered an active senior population, but they're also doing things within other parks and other parts of our facilities at the swim center, tennis courts, park areas. But the programming itself, when we say youth, we're really kind of focusing on that grade school kind of market. We have childcare, we have after school programs, and then what's lacking currently is more of that teenage or the teen type programming. So it is a balance. And I think your second question was that the multi-generational center, what does that kind of look like? And that's more of a newer term in the Parks and Rec industry. We used to just call it a community center, but now the fact is, how do you get one facility to be able to house? You might have childcare in one wing, you might have some youth programming or after school programming in another wing. At the same time, you can sort of have another section that's more of a contract classes for adults, as well as some senior activities in in the past we call it a ballroom, or a kind of a more multi-purpose room that you can mix different age groups together. So when we say multi-generational center, it's really not focusing on one age group and having 3 different facilities, but try to be a little more responsible and have one facility that you can have wings, in a sense, or sections of this facility set up for all generations, which then provides, again, what we consider a true community center, which I think Shauna alluded to when we were talking about the multicultural versus multi-generational center. Is, to us, it's the community center. It's what we program within the walls or the boundaries of that really make it what it is. And I think that's kind of, again, the newer language is calling it a multi-generational center versus a traditional community center format. Ludwig Center is called a community center, but we do multi-age groups, multi-activities, multicultural programs in that facility. We just happen to call it currently a community center.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. The gist of my question was really just to make sure that we weren't shortchanging opportunities for seniors, and I think you answered that. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Yeah, they're a vocal group, and we definitely are here for that population, no doubt about it.
Other questions from commissioners?
Maybe I could go next. Really, thank you for a really nice presentation and overview of the whole park system. And it made me feel as if, the future planning is in good hands, and it's complex, and you're trying to meet everybody's needs. And I really support the idea of trying to make sure that the people who come and work here also get a chance to participate or have recreational activities. We are a job center. We can't provide enough housing, but we need these people who come in and contribute their efforts and their energy. So I, really endorse that tack that you're taking. I know I live in the Anholm subdivision, and I know I see city employees jogging by because where they live, it's not so friendly for jogging.
Okay, yeah.
And you know, we're friendly to jogging, and I think it's nice that they can use our streets to do. You know, these are young people, so I commend that, and I do think that the programming in the Ludwig Community Center is really a real great resource because it's a centralized location, and I've gone to some terrific things there, including meetings and the succulent show and so on.
Yeah.
So I would really hope that we don't do away with the Ludwig Center in this process of finding a bigger, more comprehensive facility. Would rather see two community centers that do different kinds of things, perhaps, and Ludwig being more urbane and, you know, something in a park system doing other kinds of things. Having said that, you know, there was a lot to read and a lot to digest. I just wanted to make the point about the facilities around Laguna Lake. We have this range of park infrastructure, but Laguna Lake is really significant because of its open space and the water qualities. And, you know, people can go to Laguna Lake and feel they're outside in the country. So people who perhaps don't have a car, you know, they cycle there and you see them walking around. So I would hope that we don't over-program Laguna Lake. I know Shauna said this had nothing to do with the open space quality, but in that inner core where you have the dog park and so on. But I just hope we'd be careful about how much and what kind of programming and facilities are put there, because I think Laguna's major, really strong contribution is in that scenic, open quality of being in nature. Is there any thought? I know when I was serving on the loose, I think it was one of our former planning commissioners, I'm blocking on who it was, or either Maltari or our chair, Eric Meyer, said, you know, we've got to try and see if we can get that mountain. We've got to try and see if we can expand the holdings there. And I didn't really see, maybe I missed it, any plans for trying to see if we can get an expansion of the open space areas in Laguna.
Great.
Oh, go ahead, Greg.
I was like, those are all great questions. I'll address all those. I'll go backwards in order. But as far as land acquisition for open space is considered what Shauna had started earlier, part of our other conservation and open space plan. So it's a separate entity. We have a whole different division that our Parks and Rec oversees the ranger services, but our Bob Hill, who spoke earlier tonight, is our natural resource manager, and we work together collaboratively on the open space. So we currently have 12 open space areas now, and that includes Cerro San Luis and the backside of Laguna Lake that goes out towards the Madonna property and into doesn't quite all the way connect to Foothill, but kind of back that direction, then wrap up around towards Cerro San Luis. So that's not a part of this plan, but it is a focus by City Council, by City staff, and both the Parks and Rec departments and the Natural Resources Department. Your second one, the accessibility for Laguna Lake. One thing that we probably didn't emphasize tonight is kind of going with what Shauna put on in that map with the overlays was we are trying to come up with a formula in sort of a statement where she mentioned a half-mile distance or a 10-minute walk where you're able to have access to either a neighborhood park, community park, from your residence. So you're able to have a bike path, a walking path, a neighborhood path to achieve that access to a park area. And that includes Laguna Lake. So with the new housing at San Luis Ranch, with all the properties around Ocean Air and across the street from there,
Having the new bike paths and the new walking paths is an important factor that we already knew was in motion and part of a plan. But that's how we would tie in the natural area of Laguna Lake. And the dog park and the dog area is currently there. We have the nice outdoor gazebo and the barbecue and the playground area. And those are all important factors for the integrity of that park that then leads into the natural water and conservation area where we want to really revitalize, I think, the use of the lake itself. For those who've lived here for a long time, we had the early 80s and probably even early 90s where we had a lot more activity on the water, not just around the water. And we're making some efforts now with the dredging project that's coming up as a pilot program to see if we can kind of bring that back to life and really use our city biologists, natural resources, and parks and recreation to revitalize the lake itself as a focal point. The opportunity that the consultants and staff and us in the management is there a blend in the front section potentially along the Madonna Road side that we can have some active recreation to kind of lead you into that natural setting and then continue out towards the open space so it blends in from the neighborhoods into that whole thing. So we're very conscientious, again, of our open space and natural resources. The city has, I believe, always taken that approach, and this plan is honoring that as well. We want it to honor that, and hopefully the wording and the concepts are representing that. The daytime population you mentioned as well, and I think there's a challenge with that. We know the outside users, as if it's businesses, we've got a hub for the county. We've got a lot of private businesses. We have tourism. We have neighboring cities. They're going to come no matter what. So we want to make sure we have enough space and access for our own community, as well as factoring in that they're going to be there anyway. And there's a percentage that are going to use the facility. So if we only have a certain amount of tennis courts for our population and they're being used, and there's 6 tennis courts and 2 of them are being used all the time because we have local businesses, we want to make sure we have enough inventory to support our tax-paying traditional resident community as well as the service population. So it's that balance like you were talking about. And the Ludwig Community Center is a historic kind of used to be an old USO venue. So there has a lot of history to it. It is our currently only community center. And I think we're hopefully all on the same page that whatever we can do to revitalize that and renovate, but I do believe that we most likely need an additional one to kind of fill out the sub area, the inventory that the map that Shauna has up to meet the needs of accessibility on each side or each section of our city now that we have a freeway, we have mountain ranges, we have railroad tracks that really divide our city up, and accessibility is important for this entire plan. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Nick, did you have any questions?
I don't, Chair. Thank you very much to staff for the great presentation. It was really informative.
Yeah. I'll just quickly ask a question or two just to be sure I'm understanding. There is a goal, 4.4 or something. That's what my notes seem to say. Partnership with school districts. And part of what I was wondering was schools aren't mentioned in this report, with the exception that the swim center appears to be on school district property, and there could be other things, say like the tennis courts at the high school that are so much a public amenity. But why is that? Is it impossible to work with the school districts, particularly the one that's local to the city, or is it just, it just as a longtime user of school properties for recreation,
right?
The fences and everything have been hardened. There's a lot of, there seems to be money for that, and it makes it harder to get in and harder to understand sort of how we can take advantage of marvelous outdoor facilities, or indoor facilities for that matter. But I just wanted to kind of ask.
Great question. We currently have a great relationship with the San Luis Coastal District.
We right now, because of the lack of facilities that we currently have, we do utilize their multi-purpose rooms and gymnasiums for a lot of our youth sports. So we have a partnership with them. We have an agreement. We have our childcare at 5 of their school sites, their elementary school sites. But we are limited on accessibility and access because they're actually running their programs, right? They have their own school programs that also can conflict with timing wise and resources that we're utilizing. But currently, like our youth baseball, for example, we have 2 fields or 2.5 fields for a diamonds type sport field for youth baseball. However, the school district has multiple, so we do have a partnership to allow for that crossover. I mentioned the gymnasiums and our childcare for after school and before school programs. So what we want to do in this goal is really make sure that we continue to foster that relationship. There might be future collaborations where we can come in together with funding to either renovate or build something new, and then it has another agreement with that. The statement for that Shauna was mentioning about the swim center, Sinsheimer Park is really school district property, and we have a long-term lease to utilize that. To expand our boundaries, there's a current bus depot that's in Sinsheimer Park when you first pull in off of Southwood. That's an opportunity for discussion with the school district. Is that the best location for a bus depot? And if it's not, or it's outgrown its size, can the city potentially acquire that land and we can relocate the bus depot? And then you can make, again, with that master plan kind of concept that Shauna stated, how do you incorporate that square footage and property into the park for more amenities? Is it additional courts? Is it additional fields? Is it a teen center to support the neighborhood and the programs and the schools that are in that neighborhood? There's a lot of opportunity there. We know that we're sort of landlocked in certain sections of our community, and there's other areas that we'd have to make some arrangements and some connections for land acquisition to see if there's opportunity for expansion or annexing. But our goal for that is to utilize the collaboration and partnerships that we already have and expand upon those. And if there's any new ones that would benefit both parties, and in school school and the city can win in the long term.
I guess I didn't quite notice, maybe I didn't read carefully enough to see if any user statistics of shared facilities. I didn't quite notice that and didn't pop out in any way, but
right now there's a lack of facilities within our community as a whole. So the YMCA, we have a partnership and agreement with them. They actually lease a city facility for their fitness center and offices. We have a partnership with them for some programming and use of the swim center, as well as collaborating with them with the youth sport program that we do. So that's as an example of a microcosm of an example of what we can do if we're able to expand our facilities to be. And then shared use and multi-use is probably the most important part of this plan of being efficient with your property. So you're not building a specific field or a specific facility for one thing only that only gets to be used 3 or 4 hours a day, but it's a multi-purpose facility. So you can use it for multiple recreational amenities, and multiple groups can utilize it, so you get the best bang for your buck.
Yeah, and also there's still safe routes to school funding, and so that's a way of utilizing that for recreation activities that city residents are able to use as well.
Yeah,
it'd be nice if there were safe routes to park money.
I like it. Keep talking.
Something we do. I'll stop there. But thank you so much for all of this, and particularly the tremendous outreach effort. It was just monumental what you guys have done. So, City Clerk, are there any public comments or public members who wish to speak?
There are no members of the public asking to speak at this time.
Not from the presentation, just the late hour. The presentation probably woke everybody up. So then we'll come back to the commission for deliberation. We've got a proposed resolution in front of us. Are there comments, questions? Is there someone who'd like to move that recommendation to adopt the resolution? The City Council adopt that resolution to support the blueprint for the future?
I'd like to make the motion to approve moving this forward to City Council for adoption.
I'll second.
A second from Mike Wilkin. Amen. Further discussion? I'm not hearing any. I think we should vote. Kevin, can you call the roll?
Commissioner Dondekar,
Yes.
Commissioner Wilkin,
Yes.
Vice Chair Quincy,
Yes.
Chair Jorgensen.
Yes,
Motion passes.
unanimously. It's really well done. A lot of work. It shows. Shows well.
Well, thank you to your commission for reading through all the material and sitting us here with you tonight and providing some great questions for Greg to answer. So thank you, Greg.
Kept him awake.
Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much.
We
Oh,
appreciate
great.
your time. Thank you for, again, a late night, but we really appreciate your time and effort. And again, looking through this document, it's very comprehensive. We understand that. It's doesn't always speak easy language sometimes, but we appreciate your questions. And thank you very much tonight. Thank you very much.
I'm sorry you had to sit through the first 2.5 hours. I'm not sure that was a very apt recruiting device for new commission members, but always something to learn.
I have family and friends that live in that neighborhood. I was very curious to see what's going to occur. So
yeah,
entertaining.
Yeah, so are we. Well, thank you. So now I'll move on to staff updates and agenda forecasts. Tyler.
All right. Well, here we are. Kind of looking out. The next meeting that's regularly scheduled for the June 9th date, we don't have any current items on that. And so that one's going to be canceled. And so next meeting, we have one item which was continued from tonight. So we're going to hear the Westmont, 500 Westmont subdivision again. We'll take a look at all the comments as was mentioned from tonight, as well as the other agenda correspondence we've received, and then look at any adjustments or updates that may be required or needed in the environmental before we bring that back. And then looking out past that date, we have the first meeting in July. We have currently one item on that agenda. It's the airport hotel. So this is it's actually like two hotels kind of combined into one out there at 950 and 990 Arrow. We're looking at a total of 204 rooms, about 3 stories in height, and 125,000 square feet of total building. So that would be scheduled for that date. And that's what I have kind of getting out into the first meeting of July. As I mentioned earlier, we don't know yet when we may be back in person. I think we'll know more in about a week or so once we hear some recommendations that come from Cal OSHA in terms of how employers, some guidance and recommendations from them, how they need to be keeping employees safe. And so once we hear that, we'll be rolling out our reopening plan, and we'll have more information on when we might have our first public meeting back in the chambers and what that might look like. So I'll be following up with that. So next meeting is going to be the regularly scheduled meeting for June 23rd.
Okay.
Any questions or any follow-up from tonight?
No, but appreciate all staff's work and sitting through a long session.
No, it was good. It was a good conversation, and you know, I think it was helpful to hear from obviously all the neighbors and on that particular item, and just kind of looking forward to you know, closing out the public comment period on that environmental document, and then seeing if there's any changes to any impact analysis with that.
Yeah,
I had a thought for Tyler, if that's okay,
Please.
regarding the Westmont project. I was wondering if it would be appropriate to contact the commissioners who weren't present today and let them know that they should be listening to the tapes of this meeting or the video of this meeting, watching the video in order to participate in the continued meeting on June 23rd, I think it was.
Yeah, absolutely. Great comment. Appreciate that. I was planning on following up this week and letting them know to please do review the tape, understand, and read the staff report, because that, might change, it might not. We're not sure yet in terms of what modifications might be necessary there, but definitely get up to speed with the staff report and review the video so they're up to speed and can feel comfortable acting on that project on the 23rd. Appreciate that.
Well, good. Okay. Well, thank you all. The next meeting is scheduled then for June 23rd. We're adjourned.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Night.
Good night.